I pledge allegiance to the flag So first item is public comment. And this is for items that are not on our agenda for tonight. And I will start here with Aisha Shafiqi. If you would state your name and student attendance area, you'll have 2 minutes to speak, and I would ask that you wrap up as soon as you hear the timer.
Salam, my name is Aisha Shafiq and my daughter goes to Pine Lake Middle School. I was quite disheartened to hear previous speakers here cite the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism as a guideline for determining what should be permissible speech. As a political scientist myself, I strongly urge the board to instead focus on the Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism, which is a definition more rigorously formulated by academics across the world, including those from Israel. These scholars have concerns that the IHRA working definition, through its examples, conflates legitimate criticism of Israel with racism against Jews. The IHRA definition has been pushed into political venues for adoption to dampen criticism of Israeli occupation and human rights abuses of Palestinians. But doing so leads to separate systems of justice. And I do not want my child to have to grapple with why she cannot condemn oppression and human rights abuses in certain spheres, lest she be labeled anti-Semitic. She should be able to simultaneously and clearly condemn oppression and anti-Semitism. We have seen recently the amount of pressure exerted on universities to suppress criticism of Israeli policy. Control over language has been used to twist calls for equal rights as calls for genocide. Education systems are being intimidated to tamp down on criticism of Israeli policy, even as today, the International Court of Justice heard why Israel's actions in Gaza constitute the crime of genocide, and the UN has warned that if current conditions in Gaza persist, 1/4 of the population will die this year. I am here because I want my child to maintain her simple and straightforward sense of justice, a justice that stays true even if you anonymize the victims and the perpetrators. To this end, I hope our curriculum and school policy is rigorous about the definitions that inform it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Faiza, Tasneem, and Zara.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. We are here today not as scholars on this genocide, but just as 3 sophomores who believe in a cause that resonates with many, the call for a liberated Palestine. While death counts are disputed by those who want to downplay the transparent genocide in Palestine, the Gazan Ministry of Health has recorded about 30,000 dead in the span of 3 months.
As Muslims ourselves, we have a strong connection with our brothers and sisters in Palestine and believe we have duties as humans to speak against the genocide of the Palestinian people. Those who came from different religions, backgrounds, and all have the same rich lineage that stems back centuries in the same land of Palestine.
As sophomores, the beginning unit of the humanities curriculum revolved around the Holocaust and the atrocities committed against the Jews. We read a book by author Elie Wiesel, who survived multiple death camps and who returned to the public eye to explain the impact neutrality has on victims of cruelty. Many parallels can be drawn from the Holocaust to the genocide happening in Palestine today.
One of Wiesel's speeches, called The Perils of Indifference, lists the impacts of neutralities on victims. He says, "Indifference elicits no response. Indifference is not a response. Indifference is not a beginning, it is an end, and therefore indifference is always the friend of the enemy, for it benefits the aggressor." Do we honestly, as a society, believe that our actions are anything but indifferent?
Elie Wiesel's words resonate with the present situation today, as most of us who decide to watch the news and decide to be educated are fully aware of the ongoing brutality happening in Palestine. Yet we continue to sit comfortably in our homes, scrolling behind a screen to videos of kids without limbs, and acting as if this is usual and that it isn't our problem as Americans. The indifference is loud. We constantly teach in our school system the idea of not repeating history, but we don't apply it. And our future generations will ask why, and we will not have an excuse.
Our silence is shameful. The overgeneralization of knowledge is frequent in our schools, and often we face a common thread of an unspoken bias and then plain, unsympathetic presentation of the situation. We believe in our cause, the freedom of Palestinians, and are going to stand up for it, regardless of the indifference shown by others. Thank you.
Thank you. So we would ask that applause be done this way if you want to do, so we can see agreement. Right. They're here to speak to us, not to you. And if you can't do that, then we'd ask you to find a different place to listen. So the next one is Nada Alred.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nada Alwarid. My kids attend ISD schools. I'm of Iraqi descent. As I sat through public comments in the previous board meeting, the air in the room felt so thick you could cut it. I witnessed speakers denying the existence of Palestinians and the atrocities they're subjected to. Audience members booing speakers of Arab, Palestinian, or Muslim descent for sharing facts about their identities, experiences, and the suffrage of their families. This reminded me of Professor Komsky's words. Education is not memorizing that Hitler killed 6 million Jews. Education is understanding how millions of ordinary Germans were convinced that it was required. Education is learning how to spot the signs of history repeating itself. When I made it back to my car that evening, I took a moment to reflect and shake off how toxic it felt. I reflected on how unsafe I felt in that room, despite having the protection of ISD staffers who intervened that night. I reflected on how students must feel in their classrooms when their cultures and identities are dismissed or belittled. And this is based on an increasing number of incidents we see at some of our schools. To this end, I am asking the district to start enacting positive changes. Number one, diversity and inclusion staff trainings currently aren't inclusive of Arab and Muslim cultures, and it really needs to be. Number two, cultural materials used by teachers should be produced in partnership with the people who belong to that culture. Our community is eager to collaborate with you in this endeavor. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next is Sarah Duke on Zoom. So we will allow you to unmute yourself. If you would turn on your camera so we can see you.
I'm trying to. It's saying you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Try again, please.
Okay, I'm trying, and it's still saying you cannot start video. Let me try one more time. Okay, now it's allowing. Okay, good evening. Thank you. My name is Sarah Duke, and I have a child at Pine Lake. I'm here to talk about the parallels of the messages from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in celebration of his upcoming birthday, and unfortunately, the tragedy that we are still facing in the world, and to make request of the board in supporting students' activities towards the path of justice and equality in among our students, among our society, and throughout the world. So in 1962, Dr. King delivered a speech at the American Negro Leadership Conference, and he declared, and I quote, "Colonialism and segregation are nearly synonymous because their common end is economic exploitation, political domination, and the debasing of human personality. I grew up listening to Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech every year, and his words, I can hear them echoing and resounding in my head still today. His speech, I Have a Dream, referenced free and freedom 26 times. And one of the famous ending of his speech goes, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet and from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Listening and thinking about these words and what is happening in our world today and what our children are witnessing and bearing witness to. And I know our children are trying to express their support, and they have done some expression, but I would encourage and request that the board and the school district, teachers, staff, everyone continue to support their moral courage and speaking out against the injustices that are currently occurring, especially the brutal and inhumane genocide in Gaza, which has thus far killed over 30,000 people, 70% of which are women and children. So as in closing, I would just, in addition to requesting that you continue to foster their support for freedom of speech and expression, which is calling for the freedom of segregation, the freedom of oppression, the freedom of apartheid, and the freedom from genocide, that you support their efforts and even consider supporting a justice conference for these children. Thank you so much.
Next is Virid Mizrani. No. No, I get to choose the order. Yeah. So this is the time for the person I called to speak. If you don't want to speak tonight, then that's your choice. But like that, this isn't where people select the order that they get to speak in. That's not actually how this works. Because again, you're speaking to us. That's the intent, is this is directed towards us.
No problem. Thank you. Okay, hi, I'm Vered, and my daughter goes to Skyline, and she's a junior. And I want to say that I believe that learning facts and separating them from lies is paramount for us as parents, educators, and ultimately for the kids. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hearted towards Jews, rhetorical and physical. Manifestation of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals or at their property towards Jewish community, institution, and religious facilities. Anti-Semitism is not a matter of differing political opinion. It is blatant bigotry against Jewish people simply because they are Jewish. Zionism is a simple belief that the Jewish people have the right to self-determination and independence in their ancestral homeland. So if you agree with that, then you are Zionist like me. Jewish people are indigenous to the land of Israel, dating back thousands of years, with archaeological and historical proof everywhere, similar to the Salish and the Sammamish people, being indigenous to their land. Fact, being anti-Zionist is being anti-Jewish people. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next, Jason Massman.
Go. Hi there, Jason Massman, 12-year parent of an IHS senior right now. So why is all this relevant? We're hearing a lot about Israel and Gaza here for a school district that's 1,000 miles away from the Middle East. Anti-Zionism masquerades as social justice, but manifests as bigotry and hatred of the Jewish people everywhere, and we do see examples locally. Hence, it's a concern for us as parents in the Issaquah School District. And there's clear examples of non-protected hate speech which violate school district policies and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which explicitly prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, and national origin in programs and activities receiving federal financial assistance. We need to urge school communities to be vigilant about students' rights under Title VI and provide support services for students experiencing anti-Semitic bias, harassment, and other forms of discrimination. We need to hold perpetrators of hate speech accountable. We need to collectively enforce zero tolerance for anti-Semitic tropes and hate speech within our community. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Kara Moskowitz.
Hi, I'm Kara Moskowitz. I have a son that goes to Skyline and 2 Skyline graduates. As anti-Semitic rhetoric, hate speech, and anti-Jewish sentiment spreads across the world, our public education system plays a critical role in fighting ignorance, hate speech, and discrimination. A primary pillar of the U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism calls for an increase in awareness and understanding of anti-Semitism, including its threats to America, and to broaden education about Jewish history and heritage throughout the ages. We respectfully request that the school district increase the time and attention that is devoted to these topics within the high school social studies curriculum and identify this as an essential learning objective to incorporate into staff trainings and orientations for new and current students. We need to ensure that our students are provided the historical foundation they need to navigate a world of misinformation, to empower them with critical thinking skills regarding the social media that they're consuming, and to enable them to recognize and call out these anti-Semitic tropes and hate speech. We have enough knowledge, expertise, and resources to ensure that all students can have the opportunity to learn in school communities that are safe and free from discrimination. We are here to support and uphold the Issaquah School District's commitment to providing a safe and inclusive environment where every student can thrive academically, socially, and emotionally. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Holly Wax.
Today, the 100 days. 100 days since men, women, and children were taken out of
Can you
their
introduce
homes.
yourself in your attendance area, please?
Absolutely. My name is Hallie, and I have 2 students in the Issaquah School District. Thank you. 100 days. 100 days since men, women, and children were ripped out of their homes and are still hostages in Gaza. 100 days. Yes, we would love to free Palestine from Hamas, the terrorists that use their own people as human shields and deny them of supplies in their own country. We are on your side. In the school district, we would like the school district to take a closer look at the type of education that's being taught in the schools and the outside groups funded by Hamas that are giving students and groups like the Care Club on student grounds PowerPoints and videos calling for the genocide of the Jewish people, as well as the fact that Israel does not have the right to exist. So we have several asks that we'd love to partner with the school district to combat this blatant anti-Semitism happening on school grounds. We would like to hold a teach-in for students and faculty and guidance counselors to talk to a rabbi and be able to ask questions and better understand the conflict and why students feel very unsafe in their school systems today. We would like to provide free passes to the Holocaust Center as part of this ongoing education. We would like to collaborate with the school to set a rigorous set of policies. So if someone wants to come on school grounds and do a sort of teach-in calling for the genocide of any community, any population, that they would have to be adherence with these guidelines and not that they do not make sure they do not violate Title VI. So calling for the genocide of any people is just not appropriate on school grounds or ever. And we would like a liaison, a direct liaison to the school. Oftentimes when crises occurs and children are feeling unsafe, that we have one person that we can go to share our concerns and collaborate and partner together. We have a lot of resources that we can provide to help the school system create a safe learning environment for all children and all minorities. And we really appreciate your time. We'd love to partner with you moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Noor Badran.
Hi, my name is Noor Badran. I'm a senior at Skyline High School, and I've been a part of the Issaquah School District since kindergarten. Today marks the 98th consecutive day of the ongoing tragedy in Gaza, where the death toll has now reached 9,000 children and counting. While the casualty count increases daily, we can't forget that these are not just statistics or numbers on a graph. These are children that have stories, names, and now unfulfilled dreams. As students, we have the right to speak up against genocide and demand justice for all. Or does that only apply when it's convenient? The reason I'm speaking here today is to advocate and ask for the board to establish a more inclusive curriculum that addresses the history of Palestine and other current global events. The school board and the district have a duty to ensure that students have a well-rounded understanding of the world, one that encourages critical thinking and open discussions, one that isn't filtered through biased media, and one that allows students to form their own informed opinions. As we remember Martin Luther King Jr. next week, let's remember what he once said. The function of education is to teach, to think intensively, and to think critically. Intelligence plus character. That's the goal of our true education. Thank you.
Thank you. Amir Awad. If you would make sure when you introduce yourself, if you would tell us your attendance area.
Yeah. My name is Amir Awad, and I'm part of the Skyline School District. I'm a senior in high school, and I would first like to thank you for listening to my concerns. I'm a Palestinian American, and today the issue I'd like to address is the representation of Palestinians within school. The frustration I feel towards the school district's inability to educate on sensitive matters is immense. How many Palestinians need to be killed before we discuss this matter in school? A common theme I've been made to understand within school is the importance of learning about history as to avoid repeating past mistakes. However, it seems as though the school district struggles to address modern day problems that are happening as we speak. I understand the sensitivity of this subject, so I have taken upon myself to come up with a solution for educators. The simplest and most fair basis of education would be informing students of all sides of this conflict. I urge for both sides of this conflict to be covered to the utmost extent. Let the students be informed that 1,162 Israeli lives were taken through this conflict, 1/3 of which being military personnel. However, do also inform these students about the 23,084 lives taken in Gaza, nearly 3/4 of whom being women and children. This is not my opinion, nor have I taken this from a website of bias. These are factual pieces of data, all of which are listed on Al Jazeera, United Nations Office of Humanitarian Affairs, Committee to Protect Journalists, and Jewish Telegraphic Agency. Anyone who wishes to deviate from these facts is not a believer of the truth, nor do they have the intentions of pure coverage to be broadcasted. I refuse to sit here and watch as the school district stays silent while the horrific events in Gaza continue to unfold. I ask the Issaquah School District to be active informers, as learning from the past holds no value if you refuse to act on the present. Thank you.
Thank you. Ella Hassan. Again, if you would state your attendance area, since it's not listed here.
Hi, my name is Ella and I'm a community member.
Yeah, community member where in which city?
Redmond, Washington.
Okay, that is what.
Okay, thank you. I'm here to ask the district to incorporate teaching about the Nakba, catastrophe in Arabic, which is the expulsions of the indigenous Palestinians out of their land. This is personal to me as I'm a third-generation Palestinian refugee. My grandparents come from Jaffa, Palestine, a beautiful, vibrant city on the Mediterranean. My grandparents farmed orange trees and olive trees for generations. My grandparents were violently expelled out of their home in 1948 by violent Zionist terrorist groups called the Irgun and Haganah. My great-uncle was executed because he refused to leave his house. Two great-aunts, which is, my grandmother's sisters, became refugees in Gaza, Palestine, which is literally a concentration camp. My family in Gaza is hardly living. They're trying to endure starvation, disease, and dehydration. Israeli military strikes have bombed the apartment building where my family is living, and they've killed 36 people. They bombed the ambulance that was carrying some injured as well. You must include teaching about the Nakba because it includes the stories of 750,000 other Palestinians similar to my grandparents. Maybe teaching about the Nakba will produce empathetic leaders who can choose justice, freedom, equality over money, power, bullying, colonization, and imperialism. Thank you.
Thank you. Bilal, Riyad. Again, if you'd state where you're from.
My name is Bilal Riyad, and I'm a community member in Issaquah. So I wanted to start by saying thank you so much for hosting us today. First of all, it's 100 years since the first initial Nakba happened when Palestine has been occupied by the Israeli forces. I wanted to kind of elaborate on 100 years, and we are here today still discussing who and who has not the right to the land. 100 years of fiction, and I would like to kind of invite everyone to kind of move and counter that fiction with fact. As an educational center here in Washington and even around the US, we should start looking at the future and where do we go from here? How do we get out of this cycle of violence that has happened and cursed the Middle East for ages? I think education is the key. I think education to our kids to not repeat the same mistakes that their parents has made throughout the years is a key of our success. Education is based on facts, and facts are recorded. United Nations has recorded the history of Palestine and the Middle East. I would encourage everyone to kind of look at the United Nations websites, look at the resolution that has been established in 1948, 1967. Some of the facts that I would like to elaborate on: Palestine was a country prior to the occupation in 1948. Palestine was mentioned in the name in the Declaration of Balfour. The Palestinian flag is a recognized flag internationally and is flying proudly in front of the United Nations offices around the world. The kufiya is a symbol of the olive tree, and it is it's partly a symbol of the Middle East. The kufiya exists in Jordan, the kufiya exists in Lebanon and Syria and Egypt. So it's not a symbol of terrorism as it is considered today. Palestinians are educated. Palestinians would like to share this education with the rest of the world. We would encourage the board here to incorporate some education of the Middle East in their curriculum, as this will help us to kind of pass beyond the last 100 years and get into a peaceful future soon, hopefully. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ari Shapiro.
Hi, my name is Ari, and my children attend Discovery Elementary. One of the coolest things I'm proud of my kids learning here has been in their first grade, the difference between facts and opinions. And I think that that's increasingly important for us as parents, educators, and ultimately for the kids, especially when lies are used as a form of hate speech. So what is the meaning of some of the terms we've been hearing in the last months? From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, essentially seeks Israel's destruction through violent means, as it's fundamentally a call for a Palestinian state extending from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, territory that includes the state of Israel, which would mean the dismantling of the Jewish state. It is an anti-Semitic charge denying the Jewish right to self-determination, including the removal of Jews from their ancestral homeland, the only Jewish state in the world. Globalized Intifada calls for violence against Israelis, Jews, and institutions supporting Israel. Actually, the last Intifada included Palestinian terror attacks like suicide bombings in civilian areas like a pizza shop and passenger bus. While the intent of the person saying this phrase may be different, the impact on the Jewish community remains the same. And last, apartheid. Israel is a multicultural democracy and minorities participate fully in public life. Arabs represent 21% of Israel's citizens. They are represented in the parliament and have equal rights under the law, including voting rights. Israel is one of the few places in the Middle East where Arab women may vote. With 250,000 attendees, the Pride Parade of Tel Aviv is the biggest Pride celebration in continental Asia. On the other hand, Palestinians on the West Bank and Gaza are not citizens of Israel. They are governed by their own leaders in Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. To point out one of the cultural differences, in Gaza, coming out is a death sentence because police don't act against queer-phobic violence. Thank you for being receptive to the difference between facts and opinions.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, tonight for your public input. This closes this section of our meeting. As you guys are welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting. We have a lot of exciting information to hear from our students. But if you choose to go, we just ask that you continue to model the behaviors that we want to see amongst all of our students and families across our district. Thank you. So the next is approval of the consent agenda.
I move the consent agenda be approved as presented, or excuse me, as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Passes unanimously. Next item is establishment of the regular agenda. Are there any changes, Superintendent?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Okay. First item on our regular agenda is the work study recap, but actually, we are going to continue the work study. And Dr. Bailey is somewhere nearby if she wants to join us up front if there's some facilitation. But my understanding is the next part that we wanted to hear is we have student representatives and they have a question that they were prepared to provide input and perspective on. And the question was, how do you, the students, feel the classes you have taken in the past have prepared you for the classes you're in now? Did you feel well prepared to enter this school year in whatever pathway you are following? And I don't know what have you prepared for how the order or whatnot. So I was gonna let you do any facilitation you wanted to do.
Danny Bailey, thanks. Kids, take it away. Students, you are prepared to present on that question number 1.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Okay. My name is Naomi Wu. I attend Issaquah High School. I'm currently in pre-calculus as a junior. In my experience in the Issaquah High School and as well as just like Issaquah School District in general, I feel like our math curriculum has done a very good job at keeping us updated and like keeping the flow between math courses as we move up through the grades very smooth. The math curriculum and the math subject in general at my schools do a very good job of this by just like reviewing past content that carries over to the next level. And throughout all of my math classes over the years, I've seen this the same way. And it's very helpful to students because over the summer, we usually tend to forget or like become lacking in some skills. So then the review after summer and into the new school year, as well as into new units in the school year, are extremely helpful to carrying over skills. And I believe that's been done very well.
My name is Siddharth Basri, and I am the senior representative for Issaquah High School. For me, I echo Naomi's sentiments about math. I feel in general that there's quite a lot of overlap between the course material and from what I think it's pretty useful for kids to review. One of the more awkward transitions in the math curriculum for me in my opinion was that segment at the start of high school between Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, mainly because to me, it feels like Algebra 2 is more of a continuation of Algebra 1, and then there's like that 1 year of geometry just stuck in between. And I feel that it's difficult to actually be able to apply Algebra 1 concepts in Algebra 2 because kids will forget that as they're taking geometry. So that was my opinion. Students in general also had mixed opinions about whether they were prepared for this year or not. It seems that a lot of kids have noted that it's about that the teachers they have matter a lot, and whether they choose to review the concepts or not. Most of the students really appreciate that extra review time that happens, especially at the start of math classes. Especially among those who are not prepared, they cited that science classes were typically not that well prepared for, and it's kind of makes sense to me because even I sometimes might have struggled, but so I see that the regular curriculum includes bio, chem, and physics, and starting 3 classes that most kids in Issaquah School District would take. And these classes, I don't feel they overlap a lot in terms of content. So it's not like bio prepares you for chem and chem prepares you for physics. So perhaps that's why I found transitioning to some of these classes more tricky.
Hi, my name's Ashita, and I do think that to some level there is a good continuation of the material that we learn and how it builds up into the following years. And I think it's done really well in math, especially. Something I would like to point out, though, is for me, the biggest discrepancy was probably between my language classes in middle school versus high school. I don't think I personally was very prepared for the rigor of high school language arts. So I think it might be helpful to look into that. And from what I know from other students, I think that there is a good continuation in most classes. I do agree that the sciences are a little bit disconnected, but since they are such different subjects, I don't think they really interconnect with each other. They're just different science courses you take. But overall, I think the district's doing a good job. So thank you.
Hello, so I attend Gibson Egg High School, and it's a very different curriculum. I would say, again, the way we can see the most kind of difference in overlaps of classes and courses is in the math curriculum as well. It's all done online, and the overlap of the different courses are so half of it I would say is repeating, and the rest of it is kind of taught in a way that's a little bit confusing. And I've heard from many students that they would like a personal connection with the teacher that could kind of provide them tips and tricks for that. So I think that's probably the way we can see the most problems, would say, is in the math curriculum. In the rest of our classes, we have what's called D-Labs, and they are just scheduled for 6-week courses, so they're only supposed to be like 1 course long. There are some cases where they're supposed to be longer than 6 weeks, and in those cases, they're very specially planned out so that it overlaps really nicely, but most of the time, it's only 6 weeks long. So I think that's done pretty well, and you can get a variety of different topics. And I mean, they're taught by either like an expert or a student who has done a lot of work with experts in that sort of field. So I think it's pretty unique and cool aspect of Gibson. But again, yeah, the math courses are kind of tough overlappers again. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Hava Alcorn. I also attend Gibson Eck. We, like Leilani said, our classes are a little bit different, and building classes, like stacking classes, work a little differently. Our math program, a lot of kids do struggle with that. And personally, I came out of homeschool, so for me, the math program works really well. As someone who struggles in math, it's been nice to have the support of my advisors through the Alex program and they are able to help me see the connections and the way that the different math courses lead into each other. At Gibson Eck, I'd say the biggest example of stacking, a stacking course would be our actual competencies and our process through the design thinking method. In our first year, every year we have grade level, and in our first year, we are taught specifically how the design thinking method works. And as we go through our years, we're kind of guided in a way that helps us think more complexly about how we might use the design thinking method to drive our learning and to sort of structure our projects. And so through that, while our D labs can seem a little scattered to an outside eye and seem like there isn't a ton of consistency, because I'm being guided through the design thinking method, my entire school journey, high school journey, is a big design thinking method, and my teachers are able to guide me through those scattered D labs and say, well, you learned this last session, and so to build on that, it might be helpful if you do this. So we don't have stacking classes in the same way. That's the best example. And I feel that it's really working, and the support of our advisors is very helpful.
Hi, I'm Mia Williamson, and I go to Liberty High School. I don't have too much to add. I feel like the sentiments of students across comprehensive high schools are pretty similar in regards to this kind of pathways. But two specific points I have is when interviewing a focus group earlier this month, a few students said that foreign language has been difficult for them because it's such a new subject that moving from year to year, they don't feel like there's enough review to support them and give them the base that they need to continue learning the next level of foreign language. So that might be an instructional area that could be improved. And to end on a high note, a lot of the students I talked to said they thought that teachers did a great job of transitioning through online school and the pandemic to adapt the curriculum to make sure that students could still learn while online, and then making sure that they didn't speed back too quickly when we came back to school. Thank you.
Before I open up to the board to enter into this dialogue, now that you guys have heard each other speak and share, did that make you want to add on to anything or add other examples?
So also, I don't take foreign language, but a lot of my friends do. And the way it's formatted, we have like half of the year is, to preface, we only have one foreign language, and we don't have many teachers, and it's really cool that we're able to provide this program because we have a teacher who's also an advisor who's teaching Spanish. However, half the year is started in Spanish 2, and then the other half goes back to Spanish 1, and it's staggered in this way so that students coming back can start Spanish they can start Spanish like midway through the year, and then when they come back the next year, they can start Spanish in Spanish 2 the next year. And so students that are just coming in or just decided that they wanted to start learning a language in the beginning of the year have to wait until the Spanish 1 session is offered. So I think that stacking is sometimes beneficial if they decide like later in the year that they want to start, and sometimes it can come across as a bit of a problem, so students have to wait a little bit longer. So yeah.
Yeah, adding on to Leilani's point about and Mia's points about foreign languages. I actually thought the opposite when I was taking this class, my Spanish classes at IHS. I felt that there was quite a lot of overlap, especially, but that might be because of COVID. I feel that most of the grammar concepts, like present, like all the tenses, present tense, past tense, so a lot of that was covered in Spanish too, and then it was covered again in 3 as well. And this is even for the honors classes, which was pretty surprising for me. Again, this is just my opinion, and I feel that I would not be surprised if there are people who would think differently, and maybe this review is pretty helpful for those students.
Opening up to the board. Any wonderings or?
I would say one of the wonderings that I had based on our conversation, especially with the large number of students in Math 1 that were on IEPs, 504s, and multilingual languages, but more in the special ed is, how do we then track how special ed funding is recognized? If I have a classroom that's 50% students on either an IEP or a 504, how does that get translated in? Like, where are their services then? If that's if that ends up being a support class for them, then how is that measured as far as how are we spending those special ed dollars? I always had a question because my son was a special ed student, but he had one class in which he was pulled out. And I thought, well, how do we account then for the cost of services for him if that cost is only 20% of his time? And now when we have a classroom that is half of them are on IEPs or 504s, how are we accounting for those expenditures when we talk about how much we're spending on special ed? Are we expending any additional dollars for them? Or are they losing some of that funding that we get that we should be spending on them because now they're in a consolidated classroom? And I don't know if I'm clearly making my sense, but I feel like there's a math calculation thing that seems to be missing in tracking how we're really spending our special ed dollars on students that clearly need special ed services.
Thank you.
So I think for me, if I just maybe go back to the context a little bit, because that was important to me in our work study, which is being able to have a couple parts of a conversation about our ends too. It's really important about what we do here, academics and foundations. But I think the conversation was really helpful to start out with having both our student representatives as well as teachers in the conversation at both the elementary and middle level. And so I think it was incredibly helpful to have insights of teachers who are in elementary, who are focused on early literacy and how that's been going and how we've been able to change some of their support systems and then how they're supporting their students. And then hear from the middle school perspective about math and the updated math curriculum. So I think just the structure of the conversation, having teachers, students, us, and the ability to talk about the variance in curriculum over levels, very helpful conversation, particularly as we go into tonight's conversation about our budget and how we allot funding, to your point about how does it all show up. I think what was really great to be able to hear is about how some of those early interventions, some of the newer ones, starting to see the decreasing need for additional support services for older elementary students because we're catching some of their concerns earlier. And then I was very pleased to hear about some of the additional literacy supports as it relates to math and the literacy intensive components of math in both elementary and then in middle. So for me, it just felt like a really full circle conversation to touch on all the pieces and to give us a really good sense that the investments we have been making over the last few years are making real impact, and then to help direct what are some of the additional things we may want to do to continue to strengthen that model.
Thank you for summarizing our work study. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Superintendent and Dr. Bailey, for arranging that. I think it's really powerful for us to have students at our work studies as well as to have teachers. The more times that we can have our educators join us, no matter what the topic is, their perspective is really invaluable.
Great. I also want to thank Rich Mellish for helping to support that content and getting prepared with Dr. Bailey. I realize I have something a mint in my mouth to help my throat. I also wanted to say it's really great to have student voice at those times, and I want to thank our teachers for their time. And a lot of good discussion came out around how we continue to understand both the impacts that are positive, but there are also times where we notice something that was unintended, and how we then surface that in a way that helps us move forward to address those unintended consequences and be in a learning stance to with each other to receive that information and to make forward progress.
As we look to our next step of this work study for E2, we'll be formally looking at the data that was all attached for this. Now you have a lot more context to place the data in scaffold. What questions do you have based on today's discussion that you want to make sure that we capture and can get answers for, or have more time for discussion or dialogue about that today prompted, if any?
So maybe staying with my continuum mental state of the day or of this session is, and I was flipping through some of the data packs as we were having that conversation. And maybe for me, if they were in a little bit more order, like of how an individual student is experiencing that over time or through grade level. Because we kind of jump from seeing all of the grade levels of reading, but then we're looking at math in a separate place. And so it would be kind of nice to try to pull, for me, you know, a grade level across subjects together, and then what the supports are at that level. If students are either trending above grade level, here's the things they can go and accelerate and do, or if they're having challenges, here are some of the supports for them. What does that look like at second grade versus fourth grade versus seventh grade, right? How could we take a couple of examples at a point in time, I guess?
Would that be helpful for other board members as well, so we can get sort of a head nod of how to organize the information and advance that?
I would agree. I would just tack on too. I think learning and hearing from the students and teachers is very helpful, but I think as new board members, having it tied to the data, so we're getting that information and then tying it back to the data would be helpful, and having it more closely tied together so we can make that connection would be great. Thank you.
We promise the next one will be longer so we can actually do that piece. But I do think that, especially highlighting what Dr. Moyne said about the supports piece, about if you're going to say, hey, this is what sixth grade math performance looks like. So what are we doing for our Math 1 students, and what are we doing for our students that are above, like par excel?
It was really great, that conversation about, practical rollout of our ends. Really appreciated that. A lot of conversation, understand why for math and literacy and English language. Would really like to hear though also about the other disciplines at the ends, cover, world history, social studies, all of those things as well, language. I'm just curious as to, how those disciplines are going as well.
Yeah, I think, E2 we know is really broad. We split up into two different reporting, which I can understand. I think for me, it's really tying the strategic plan to that. So, when we talked about the strategic plan and we talked about, well, how is the board going to have oversight? We really measure the district through our ends and our executive limitations. And it's like the discussion was the tie back between the strategic plan and the ends. And so I think that I'm just curious as to when that piece, if that's going to be, if there's going to be conversation and work study time around that, or if it's simply going to be in the reporting. Because I mean, we did have that data was provided to us of, here's the strategy and here are the measurements. But how we're going to have that conversation about those things.
Yes to everything. We're gonna build out more work study time as well as schedule some time for a retreat to do probably especially that tied together piece. We're just kind of be both thoughtful and methodical about this as we onboard 2 new amazing school members, so we can have time to get both the narrative piece as well as the objective data piece. I think they're both equally important, and having the understanding of both will help lay a stronger foundation for you guys going forward. Did our students have any final reflections on the work study? I know this is one of the first work studies that you guys have joined us for. As far as, did it feel, how did it feel to you?
I think that the work study was a great experience for me personally. It was good to just share how I felt and share how other people felt to not just the board but to other members who work for the district. Either maybe like there were teachers there and there were other executive directors there. I feel that was a great opportunity, and I think I was pretty uncomfortable starting out with it, but I think again, as I do more work studies, I feel that it'll become better for me.
I agree with Siddharth. I found the work study to be a wonderful experience. I especially appreciated bringing having teachers being brought in from elementary schools and middle schools, and as student representatives, we're in high school. It's a nice chance to like just reflect on our past experiences within Issaquah School District, and then just bring back how those skills that we were taught in primary school and middle school have transferred over to high school.
I completely agree with both Naomi and Siddharth. I think it was a great experience. And having a lot of different voices there, I think I really appreciated to see what teachers saw as well as what students saw, to kind of see how things work on both ends of the spectrum. And I think it changed my perspective, and I hope I was able to offer some valuable insight as well. And I'm excited to continue contributing. Well, I wasn't able to attend this work study, but hopefully I'll be able to attend the next one. It sounds like it was very valuable to have your insight be heard by all the board members.
I really enjoyed hearing from the teachers and hearing like how passionate they were about the pieces that they were talking about. I didn't like really participate in the school system before I went to Gibson Neck. I was homeschooled through middle school. But hearing what they were talking about, it like kind of rang true with me, because I felt like I was one of those kids that they were talking about, and I really appreciated hearing how much they empathize with their students, and how much they cared about their learning journey. And it was also really valuable to hear like the pros and cons of like, this is working and this is a great idea, but it's not done yet. And I just I really enjoyed hearing from them, and I really enjoyed getting to be a part of that conversation. So thank you.
Yep, follow our students who are both well-spoken here as well as well-spoken ones at the dais. They did a great job up there too.
Yes, there's a lot of pressure. So I'll start with a few key updates and announcements, and then I'll talk a little bit about the board policy and district work overall and some of those connections. So we've had several monitoring reports delayed due to the delays with our audit and audits, and specifically the accountability audit is still in progress. This audit primarily focuses on the use of bonds in relationship to the authorization of school board resolutions, and we expect that this will be finalized in the next month or so. We are working to prepare for the 2024-2025 school year that is underway, and that's evidenced by having high school graduation requirements on the agenda for tonight and consideration by the board, as well as we are behind the scenes going to be having mid-year budget reviews with cabinet after tonight so that we can further take into account those budget development guidelines and prepare for the budgeting cycle for next year. So weather is top of mind this week. Our operations team has been monitoring the weather, as has every single person in Issaquah School District. And we are preparing, as always, for the possibility of any school or program interruptions. Our process for responding to winter weather and possible school delays or closures was posted again early in the week in our weekly ISD weekly bulletin. And as a reminder, the decision for any delays or closures will be communicated by 6 a.m. So take note about tomorrow morning, everyone. And for that possibility, in various ways, you can always find out about what's happening about our notification on weather impacts would be through social media, through text messaging, our website, and also our bulletins. So in terms of board policy and district work connections, I do want to share that in support of all the board ends as well as specifically ends 2. And it's always helpful to reground ourselves in what actually ends 2 is. And that was, a helpful reference to always call it ends 2 or E2. But it's about graduation. And upon graduation, students will be academically prepared and confident to pursue higher education or specialized career training. And the district strategic plan has several strategies to support this. One strategy is to create and communicate unique pathways to graduation that ensure students understand opportunities as aligned to their pathway and to post-high school goals. In this week, on January 8th, one major milestone was accomplished for this strategy to support ends 2. We held a hybrid Pathways to Graduation Family Information Night at Issaquah High School. Over 100 families attended the in-person event in English and Spanish, as well as there were over 100 participants on Zoom. This event shared information about the high school and beyond plan, its contribution to a student individualized graduation pathway, and facilitated conversations among students and their caregivers to talk about interest and expectations around students' plan for high school and beyond. As a result of this, 170 8th grade students logged into Zello and explored the tools that are available to them. As an appreciation, I would like to thank this partnership between Lisa Neighbors, who is our Director of Career Technical Education, with the Equity, Belonging, and Family Partnership team, specifically Melanie Bonanno and Liliana Medina. And it was a partnership to make sure that it was smoothly and operationally facilitated content-wise and accessible in the 2 languages. The work study today also highlighted the connection to ends 2 for the district. And we are going to be furthering our conversation around some of the data sets that were just referenced, and specifically on some of those meaningful milestones. We do track a lot of data, and we continue to do so, but being able to look at 3rd grade reading, Algebra 1 and 9th grade on track to graduation are helpful opportunities to make sure that we are decreasing any opportunity gaps that do exist in our system. We are continuing to hear more from our students, graduate staff, family members, and community members through empathy interviews, which I spoke about at our last meeting. And at that time, we were just preparing to launch and we were investing in training. And the effort now is underway. This effort does support the district strategic plan area of authentic engagement and continues to help us make progress towards the board vision of all students thrive as they engage in meaningful learning that unlocks their passion and potential to positively impact the world. Outreach has begun after the new year and even before to individuals. We've had over 100 consent forms signed for individuals to participate, which is a precursor to being able to have the conversation. I've been hearing some positive feedback from those who've conducted interviews already as an affirming opportunity to further build relationship and listen deeply to what people are telling us. I'm hoping to conduct 5 interviews myself. I have 2 that are scheduled before the end of next week. Other efforts on authentic engagement and support of that effort for our strategic plan is to continue to foster relationships and leverage purposeful partnerships. One example that's underway and about to kick off is to participate in an AI community or artificial intelligence, not use acronyms, community of practice with approximately 10 districts across the country. And team members will be joining me that are from the teaching and learning service team, our technology team, secondary innovation and communications. As this doesn't just impact the work that our students do in their classrooms and how you leverage technology, but also how we do our work as an organization and as a district. This will be about 5 sessions, and it will really be about leveraging a framework potentially to how we can approach the work of AI in a district across all aspects, defining those system objectives, learning from systems where there are further works to experiment and further the AI applications, and then to begin and continue to test cases and examples in our own district and get feedback from others on that effort. I'll talk a little bit about student well-being, and we have several updates aimed at accessing resources that really support meeting our students' basic needs in particular. Care Solace, which we've talked about before, which launched in the middle of the fall, has booked appointments for 57 members of our community since November. And this is really exciting news because we talked about the burden of having to coordinate, to identify services, coordinate, schedule, and then actually show up at the appointment. And so this really has saved our school community members over 150 hours of time coordinating just on accessing, finding, and making appointments for care. Our counseling and student well-being team was also able to fulfill many wish lists for a handful of families prior to winter break. Items that were purchased utilizing funds from a McKinney-Vento grant included clothing, coats, books, and gear, in particular for an internship a student was participating in. These items were wrapped and distributed to families right before the break in a exciting and presentable way. And finally, the breakfast program has expanded that we've been talking about over the past year and a half to meet our goal of serving breakfast at more schools. And that update on that is that we are able to serve breakfast now and have doubled that number since last year of students being served at Clark Elementary, Issaquah Valley Elementary, Sunset Elementary, Challenger Elementary, Apollo Elementary, Issaquah Middle School, and Issaquah High School. That wraps it up for me. Updates across the district.
Thank you for those. I think we will all be eagerly awaiting what winter will bring for us in the next few hours. It's never wrong to let us know earlier rather than later. The next item on our agenda is bond planning update.
Great. So as Martin Turney and Tom Mullins approach and are at the podium, I just want to share that we officially have confirmed and notified those members that will be joining us for the Bond Advisory Committee. There are over 60 individuals on the committee. That does not include the team members who provide technical expertise and information that's required at those meetings. And we were really excited because we had many more people apply with a really large number of students who applied as well. And we truly have a diverse group of individuals who have affiliations across the district geographically, by level, and they wear multiple hats. So you're not going to see a specific affiliation for one person for one school or one area or one grade level, because many people have had graduates of the district, have been a graduate, have worked here, have kids here. And so therefore we are just thinking of them all as representatives across the whole district and with multiple hats that they wear. So we're really eager to kick that work off, and I'll pass it to Martin and Tom.
Thank you, Superintendent. As mentioned, we had quite a few applicants. I think just under 100. We almost had 100. So that was great. We sent the email out on Monday to those who were selected, so they understand that they were part of the selected group and when to come by the district for those meetings, kicking off January 30th. And then we'll have them every couple weeks up until April 30th, which is the date we'll conclude those. Have them here in the administration building, so that'll be nice. We are doing some planning work. Our internal team's been meeting to look at what we need to do in preparation for that first meeting. One of the big things is doing some building assessments, and I thought Tom could give us a brief overview of how that work's going.
The building assessments and facility assessments were set up in basically 4 groups. The architects did the general assessment of the buildings, the interiors, those type of things, along with a mechanical, electrical engineer to look at HVAC and electrical systems, fire alarm systems, intercom, all the various systems in the building. We had another team go out. They were strictly roofing and envelope consultants. They look at all the buildings, look at roofs, windows, those type of things. We had another group go out and look at fields and all the sporting facilities at the middle and high schools. And then we have a bear with me, I'm drawing a blank. We had a fourth group go out, and it's gone. The moment's gone now. But needless to say, kitchen consultants went out and looked through. I should have brought my notes, but kitchen consultants, everybody is wrapping up this week. I think we have 2 days next week. Then they'll start compiling all their information, getting pricing and estimating put to it. So we have some good information for the bond committee at the end of the month.
Thank you, Tom. Obviously, a lot of work happening in preparation for this first meeting and beyond. So we just wanted to fill you in, let you know where we're at, and wonder if there are any questions for us.
Are there any questions? Yes, Director Taylor.
Curious if any of the Green Building Act costs are in scope for the bond. Are you considering that as you're going out doing these assessments and everything?
It's yes. Mac Miller is going to be doing some of that work. They're reviewing our buildings, and they will be giving us cost estimates for getting that done. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as a board, we wanted to insist that the high schools all got evaluated prior to this, and then we could extrapolate based on what the impact was to our largest buildings, what those costs may be for our middle and elementary buildings, many of which are newer.
Right.
In order to be able to generate some reasonable estimates for that. So yes, that absolutely is a huge part of the scope of this under the safety part of our buildings.
Great. Good. Thank you.
Director Mullins?
So I almost lost what my question was as well. I had to get it back. I was like, wait a minute, this topic. So I guess my question is maybe school community input. We've had over time, we'll hear from different buildings, communities that they were hoping for, looking for, believed they needed a level of enhancements to those buildings. Is there a step in this process to hear from, I'll call it community members around each of our buildings about what might be needed or I don't want to use wanted, but what some of those questions were?
Yeah, I think so. Tom and his team with the consultants are asking the building staff and the folks that work in the building. But in addition to, that's part of the representation that we have on the committee, is that they draw from those different building and those communities. So they'll have the chance through that community. And also we'll ask that those folks reach out to others that they know and their constituency, that they can bring their questions and feedback to us through that process as well.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or input? Any questions from our student representatives? Thank you. We know that this is going to be a standing item on our agenda as is a big part of 2024.
Yes.
And trying to decrease all of the pressure of space in all of our comprehensive high schools, as much as you enjoy all your friends, maybe not so tightly packed. And parking spaces, what would that be like? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next item is the 2024-25 budget development guidelines.
I move the board adopt the 2024-25 district budget development guidelines as presented.
Second.
And before I hand it off to our superintendent, just for our newest board members, we start this off to follow Robert's rules is about, making a motion and making a second. That doesn't necessarily mean that we will pursue and go all the way through to approve at any moment. So we have the ability to. So this may generate a lot of discussion. We say, hey, we aren't ready to make a vote on this, and then we withdraw. So want to make sure you understood that it wasn't like we automatic and will force a vote.
Great. Martin Turney is continuing on to support the board in any further discussion. And I know that we did a presentation to help set up for this conversation to support the board, and eager to hear what you might need more of or less of, or if it's, yeah.
Yeah. So, Stephen, if you would mind getting the red line version up on our screen, and as we do that, maybe people might want to start off with reflections based on our discussion we were having in work study and how that like ties into this broader discussion about what we think about the budget and its importance in representing the values of our district.
I am happy to start that conversation. Because I think what you just said, President Gallinger, is really important, right? At some level, one of the most important things we get to do besides having a great superintendent is leverage the community values and how we distribute funds and how that shows up in the programming and what we think is important. And so during the conversation we were having earlier, which was all about our ends for students, their academic progress and leading to graduation, it becomes really important to understand what programs are working, what need additional assistance or support, or how, to the point about maybe unintended consequences when you accelerate in one area, you may need additional supports in another, how that conversation then translates into how we set the budget or how we set guidelines for the budget for the organization. And then the superintendent and her staff go about actually filling out that budget. So I think it really is a well-timed reflection to have that conversation about the ends for students and how some of those key and critical programs are being executed and what else we might need to be doing as we lead into this budget development guideline conversation as a board.
Thank you. And as this continues, Stephen, you want to scroll up till we get to the first set of where there's, yeah, thank you. You just go back to where it says a program that allows students to. And can you remind us the blue is which and the red is which?
The red is adjusted new content or edited content. And then the blue is resequence content. So I think there was some feedback to consolidate potentially, but then to resequence within. So that was what we attempted to do to set you up for the discussion.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can I say something just before we talk about this detail?
Of course.
I think the other thing that's really important is in that motion document that's also attached is also the overall critical steps and target dates, et cetera. So this is a process that's going to stretch well into August with the budget. So there'll be many conversations on this topic that the guidelines are just one component of. So for those following along at home or with us, we're going to basically be in conversation for about 6 or 7 months until we get to the final budget for next year. So just to set that context.
Thank you. So opening it up either for further connection or thought about our work study conversation, or to make commentary on the revised version of this that we hope is a reflection of board discussion from our last meeting.
I'll start by saying that actually for me, what the bullet point right above this, the one that says overall growth in student learning towards state and federal learning targets, as well as growth for each of the disaggregated groups. This includes students working above standard. I think that helps really clarify, like we were talking about, examples of the work that we've done already. So how we're supporting some of our schools maybe getting a little bit more funding based on their student population and needs so that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Oh, you have this many students, therefore you will have this many staff members and this many title teachers, et cetera. So that bullet point really is to the point of what does it look like to truly support those students, and is there going to be needs for us to to switch things up. Yes, you might have some classes that are going to be 15 students because that's our way of providing additional supports that we think are necessary. And there might be ramifications elsewhere within the system, but how do we highlight that? So I think that's a really important bullet point for me. And when we talk about equity, our equitable work, and equitable funding that we talked about way back at the very first part of the conversation, I'd say probably 2011, when I first started talking with staff and the board about equity. This is one that caused the most pain in the system to even discuss is, well, what do you mean? How am I going to budget equitably? What does that mean? And that was really, I think the first place I heard resistance about equity work was right here in this topic. So actually it was in the other building because it was so long ago, but yeah, and it can continue to be, but there continue to be resistance. And so that is why it's really important. And I think for me, highlighting when we do finalize a budget, that understanding how that bullet point is being achieved is going to be really important. So it's a few number of words with a big, powerful impact.
And it's reinforced in the third bullet that's in blue here, which says provides targeted resources for social emotional supports, student slash safety, gap closing, and learning loss.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
This is, me learning on the job, but I'm curious on that bullet point as to the wording around learning towards state and federal learning targets. Is there something that has been decided previously that those are the best targets for determining how to close gaps, for instance? I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but I'm wondering if there are other targets that were considered previously that would be more successful in closing gaps or providing some of these other goals to equity, so to speak. I guess it's a history lesson more than anything, is what I'm asking,
If I might, I think what that is referring to is the state educational standards that we're then required to make sure. So we want to have a budget that makes sure we're addressing all of those state standards. And then the reason federal learning targets got in there is because the federal government decided to get into the business of education through the Common Core standards. So many of our state standards emanate from those federal standards that they just felt, well, and actually so that when we get students from other states, Texas, that they're at the same standards as our children.
We have to align certain parts of our curriculum and our assessment departments in order to qualify for certain funding streams. But in general, what Dr. Morales just said, with Common Core standards and then the next generation science standards, all of those are national. I wouldn't say federal because it's not like they necessarily emanated from federal government Department of Education, but they have been widely adopted and now since had assessments which are like Smarter Balance is what Washington State has chosen, aligned to those standards.
So am I hearing a request to change that word to national rather than federal?
No, I just was answering history. That's all. Other thoughts, comments?
I think maybe what I would add on to that or tell you what I think about when you ask that question is that really our standard in the Issaquah School District? And I think that is table stakes in the standard and our goal at getting all student groups to that standard, but obviously overachieving that is where we do a lot of our additional and extra effort and work and expectation setting. But I think we have to also make sure that we're ensuring that all of our students are getting to that basic standard, which is one of the things that we'll continue to review and plan for. Does that make, that's what comes to mind for me when you ask.
Yeah, no, that's just what I wanted to know. If that's, if that is what, these are our budget guidelines, right? This is what we should be trying to attain. So if that's the goal, I understand that. But the question is though, begs the question, should there be a higher standard? an Issaquah standard. Just asking the question.
I think for us, if we can close that gap between what we see in our performance for our students in our general education classrooms versus our students in special education, which would be a federal mandate and a state mandate, then that would really be setting the stage for just broad success across our district. And so I think that one, there's alignment, and two, I think we really, our district and our district administration takes that very seriously and really does the investments, not perfect, but really wants to make that happen. And I think you see that in the performance over the past 5-6 years on where our special education students and their graduation rates and their transition points between elementary and middle and high, and really seeing intentionality there. While again, not perfect, certainly demonstrated remarkable progress.
Can I make one quick suggestion? When I look at the bullet point saying meet the requirements for Washington State high school diploma, I'm wondering if we could move that above where it says a program that allows students to. I think to Director Taylor's point, I feel like Issaquah specific items are listed under a program that allows students to. I think that's where we kind of create our own kind of unique impact in this community. And I think the table stakes, I think the Washington State high school diploma component, as Director Molling said, should be, that's one of those. I would say it kind of aligns. As I look at this, I've been kind of going back to that. That doesn't, we obviously need to notate it, but it feels like it's maybe in the wrong spot. So just a thought there.
Sure. Other thoughts, other editing suggestions? Curious on student perspective as you read these and see this is how we want to develop guidelines for how the greater than $350 million is spent for you every year. Does this seem to be consistent with the values that you hear us talk about? Or does it make you pause and give question on, well, what about this? I don't see this. Yeah.
I would say probably the bullet point right now that I feel like we really closely align with is the non-core options that are offered. I feel like our schools, well, especially our comprehensive high schools, do a great job of offering classes that are not core classes, that are across a range of subjects that students can explore for fun or for future career learning, but especially like the arts and CTE and that kind of stuff. And then the bullet point that I would say there's the most discrepancy in would be social emotional support, which I know has been something that's been difficult and lots of changes made to the integration of those kinds of things in the past few years. But I think that's probably where students would look at that and say, I don't know if I feel that impact in my school life.
Can you expand more on how students would want to see that impact?
It's difficult because especially in my surveys last year, students are like, oh, we want more mental health supports, that kind of things. And then they're also really horrible at opening up to adults about mental health and those kinds of things. I think that would be something where either more research into methods in other districts and other areas of the world that have been helpful for students, or that, like implementing something, seeing if it works, that kind of thing is the best way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's really other districts looking at us like we are leaders in that area. We invest local levy dollars for over $1 million a year, just have Swedish school-based mental health counselors in every one of our middle and high schools. And we're in the few school districts in the state that do that. And so a lot of the districts are looking at us. How are we screening students? How are we doing and integrating that into our counseling offices? Not to say we can't do better, but to answer your question directly, there's less for us to look and see like, oh, what is so-and-so school district doing? We're usually the one hosting. Yes. Sorry.
So first I wanted to talk about what Mia said about the variety of classes that we have in our high schools, like Issaquah High, Skyline High, and Liberty High. when I was doing the surveys for ends two, noted that a lot of people really appreciated that the amount of classes that we have, the variety of classes, that was very good. And I also echo the sentiment that the district's doing a good job in providing good opportunities in terms of the classes. And then looking at these points, I feel that they align pretty well with a couple of the goals. If I think about the ends, especially ends two, I can see a lot of stuff over there, but also a couple of other ends. There's something about equity over there. And yeah, student well-being is addressed. So I think this is a great outline for how we could spend, like, in theory.
Other thought? Yeah.
I just like to say, for the equitable access to resources and pathways that support individualized post-high school grades. Earlier in the year, we talked about how 35% of our students opt for a non-college pathway after high school. And I know I definitely see that in Gibson Eck. It's very clear. And just being able to have opportunities like WANIC and other things to help us decide our pathways and discover what will be the best way for us to learn and go on through our lives. I think the ISD does a really good job of providing that. And it's a really great resource. And yeah.
Thank you. Other thoughts on this page for the board? If not, Stephen, you want to go to the second page where the added bullet that's in red? So this was also an addition that was a result of board dialogue. And certainly you've provided us email updates on things and how this has impacted our district of late. So it seems like that's a really important thing that you've heard from both bond rating agencies. Anything from your perspective hearing the dialogue?
I think I heard one change, and that's helpful. And this is why we discuss it, because the world evolves, we evolve, and we hear new content. And we've had student voice on this topic now this year for in a very meaningful way. So thank you.
Yes, Dr. Maraldo.
So I heard two specific things. One was changing the word federal to national in bullet 3. And then in bullet 4, the last bullet, moving that to be bullet 2. Are those the two changes that I heard?
Yes.
So then if somebody, because I made the motion, so if somebody wanted to amend the motion, I don't know if I can amend a motion I made.
I think you can.
Yeah, you think you can.
Okay, so then I move we amend bullet number 3, removing the word federal and inserting the word national. And on bullet point 4, the last bullet, move that to be bullet number 2.
A second.
Okay.
And before we do any further discussion or voting, I do want to open this up for any public input from anyone in the room or anyone on Zoom. See none. Is there any more board discussion? No. Do I seem like the board is ready to take a vote on this item?
Or at least on the amendment, and then you can still have discussion after that.
Oh, even better. Okay. Any more discussion on the amendment? Okay. All those in favor of the amendment? Say
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. So the amended motion is before us. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of the amended motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There's your unanimous approval of the budget development guidelines. And as Director Moline said, this is yet an early step in a very long process. Long in a good way, because it allows lots of conversation and lots of open dialogue. So. The next item on our agenda is high school graduation requirements for the class of 2028.
I move board adopt graduation requirements for class of 2028 at Issaquah, Gibson, Issaquah, Lily, Skyline High Schools.
Second.
Superintendent.
Great. We have Sherry Cox here to provide a overview of some content, and she'll have a lot of other talking points that are in support of just some anticipated questions that we know are on people's minds in the community, but also potentially the boards. And I do know that we will likely have public comment as well. So I think we have one person signed up.
Great. Thank you, directors, for having me here this evening. Thank you, Superintendent. Tonight I'm here presenting, but I'm not alone in this. I just want to give a shout out to our TLS department, our Equity, Belonging, Family Partnership, our high school leaders, and our staff for their input in this presentation. And I should also thank the students tonight because they really did a great job of highlighting some of the things that they've been working on in the class as the class of 2024, 2025. But tonight I'm here to talk about the class of 2028, which are our current 8th graders out there. And so the purpose of tonight is listed here, but I'm going to take a step back as a new high school director myself, and we've got 2 new board directors. I just want to go back a little bit so that we all have the same common understanding of what the grad requirements are and what hopefully tonight you're going to approve and then ask questions about. I do want to call out though, before I go on, that there are 3 pretty significant changes to tonight's graduation requirements. First, from last year, that is, I've added Echo Glen. I don't know why in the past Echo Glen has not been part of this process. But in fact, the students at Echo Glen are Issaquah High School, are Issaquah students, and they have the same graduation requirements as the students in our comprehensive high schools. So that is added in your notes tonight. I've also included, maybe for our student up on the dais tonight, the details about the Gibson EC requirements. They're not going to be changed from what they previously were, but they've never been spelled out in as much detail as you're going to see this evening. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about high school math credits that our middle school students are earning right now. And I'm going to propose a change to you and how we see those credits. You know, my first passion is in fact middle school. So with that, I'm going to go on. These are the 3 things that you as a board approve. There is nothing that I'm going to present to you that is different from the state of Washington. Our students are required to complete these 3 things, as are all the students in the Washington public school system, unless they have a waiver like our Gibson X students. This slide is kind of hard to read, but I just wanted to really highlight. You can't see, can we move the dialogue box at the top? Because what I want you to notice is that the state and we Issaquah have the same graduation requirements across the board as far as how many English, mathematics, social studies, etc. I want to tell you what the asterisks mean because you can see the slide is a little bit full here. It just tells us that those 3 credits of science and the 3rd credit of math are chosen by the student based on the student's interest and their high school and beyond plan, which is part of our process. And I'll talk a little bit about those in a second. And then the double asterisk is the personalized pathway requirements are related courses that lead to a specific post-high school career or educational outcome that's chosen by the student based on their interest and their high school and beyond plan. These may include career and technical education and are intended to provide the focus on the student's learning. So that these are where our students have choice and voice in these decisions. And these can include things I've heard you directors talk about. Financial literacy. That is a course that's offered, and students could certainly pursue that course if it aligns with their personal pathways that are spelled out in their high school and beyond plan. I want to call out 2 places here that I'm going to come back to in slide 8. And that is the math requirements and then the social studies on this chart. And I'm going to come back to them, but I want you to note the requirements for social studies in particular require 1 U.S. history and government, 0.5 contemporary world history, geography, and problems, 0.5 credits in civics, and then the 1.0 in the electives. And I'm going to I'll come back to that. Also in slide 8, I'm going to talk a little bit about how our strategic plan is helping us align the courses across the high schools. So kind of keep that, it's a coming in action for you. The other thing, Stephen, can I get a little technical assistance here? Thank you. As I had mentioned, the other thing is the high school and beyond plan that all of our students are required to take. The state has this same requirement, and we're going to continue to roll out some new things that they have more clearly spelled out for us. For example, all 8th and 9th grade students are in the process of getting a lesson that helps them create a 4-year high school plan that's aligned to their goals and meets this high school graduation requirement. Students do all of this data entry and exploration in a program called Zello. It's just a software program that they capture this. And then we have a strategic plan strategy 2E that has a 3-year goal of using all of the student interest data that they're putting into Zello as a way to build our course catalogs so that our high school course catalogs are as aligned as tightly as possible to the student interest that's captured in this tool. And then the last graduation requirement is our graduation pathways. And Superintendent talked a little bit about the parent presentation that happened earlier this week at Issaquah High School. I think I heard one of our students mention it tonight. I don't really have anything else to add about it, except that these are the 4 pathways. So I'm going to pause here because this is what you're asked to approve is these 3 things: the credits, the graduation pathways, and then the completion of the high school and beyond plan. And just ask if you have any questions regarding these things before I go on to where, oh, actually, sorry, I don't want to miss this. Here's what I said. I called out more specifically in your documents, the graduation requirements for our Gibson Act students. We currently have a waiver for Gibson Act. It is on its last year, so we will need to go back and apply for this waiver because our Gibson Act students do not complete the 3 things that I just mentioned. This is their graduation requirements. At this time, the recommendation from the district administration is that we continue with these graduation requirements, both for Gibson Act as well as for the class of 2028. And then now I'm ready for questions on just this part.
Could you go back to the slide on career readiness?
You bet.
Yeah, this one.
Yep.
So I found these terms which you've mentioned, career readiness, military readiness, college readiness, as kind of vague. Could you elaborate on like how exactly you're measuring each of these things?
Great question. And it's not really, we're not measuring it. I can give you some more detail about each of those if you'd like, but it's not so much as a measurement as that they have to complete one of these 4 pathways. So for example, I gotta put my glasses on here. The career readiness pathway is for students who intend to go directly into the workforce, apprenticeship, community college, or technical training. They complete 2 or more of the CTE credits in the same CTE program area that include either a dual credit course or lead to a certification. The military readiness one is for students who plan to join the military for career training and education, and they have to take and pass the ASVAB, and sorry, Superintendent, I don't know what that stands for, with a score of 31 or higher. And so those are just 2 examples of the requirements in those first 2 categories.
Do you have a description of the performance base? Because that was going to be my
I can
next
just keep
question.
reading my little document, thanks to Lisa Neighbors. The performance-based is still being defined, but right now what it says is for students who demonstrate math and English language arts proficiency through a portfolio. So I know Gibson Eck, the state is about to pilot this, and Gibson Eck is asking to be considered to pilot this particular graduation pathway.
So that's actually still being defined by the state, and then we would help them.
That is
Okay,
correct.
so it's-
It is well underway to the point where they're now ready to roll out pilots on it.
And
Yes.
what would that lead to then, I guess?
Uh,
Do you have a sense of what
It
that
would lead to our students meeting the requirement of having a defined graduation pathway.
Would it
So-
be career or college, or would it be a mix, or do we know what that would be?
I don't know the details. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
I can.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
Just curious.
I can answer your question.
Okay.
So in order to graduate, what's missing here is you must pass state test as part of a graduation requirement. The SPA that you take in 10th grade. So this gives you an alternative. So it's you pass that state test in 10th grade, or you get a certain SAT score, or pass ASVAB at a certain rate, or now performance-based. It's really trying to make permanent the waivers that districts were given the flexibility to do during COVID. It's really trying to make that permanent, but to give students the opportunity who they will never be able to pass the test, but they demonstrate competency through other ways, in ways that are very individualized and part of their college, high school, and beyond plan that aligns with that. Other questions before we move on?
I do. So having a senior and now looking at this, because this is my son's year, which is fascinating. The thing that I guess that still seems a bit amiss to me, and maybe it's in the college readiness pathway, is what, at least by my reading, is the difference between our graduation requirements for college specifically, and what are the KADRs for acceptance into college. Specifically, there's an additional math requirement for senior math. And so how do we make sense of that? And does it show up in that pathway?
Great question. I can read to you. I'm just going to read to you what it says for the college readiness pathway, because it's a curiosity. And I actually was just having a conversation to get some information back to a parent about that very thing. Is while these are our graduation requirements, they are not what, for example, the University of Washington requires a student to have completed in order to get in. And so I can only tell you that I'm hopeful, and I believe that our counselors are, and I guess I have got some experts sitting right here in the room with me, students, that our counselors are helping have those conversations with students who are, I see nodding heads, that's great news, who are having those conversations with students about, well, you only need 3 science credits. If you are going to go into science in college, you want to pursue the 4th one. So the college readiness, it says for students who plan to complete 2 or 4-year degree in a college or university, they can use any combination of math and ELA options. So the first one is state level assessment, Smarter Balance, or the Washington Ames assessment. Second bullet is dual credit. It's 1 credit each in math and ELA. AP, IB, earn a C+ or higher. CTE dual credit, must earn high school credit in math and ELA. And college and the high school are running START course. Another bullet point is college admission. So if you score certain scores on the SAT or the ACT, or dual credit exams in the AP or IB realm. So scoring a 3 or higher on the AP exam and a 4 or higher on the IB exams are the credit. And I'm happy this was what was presented to parents that I'm reading from. So I'm happy to get you all copies of that.
Yeah. So for me, going through this process, this one feels like an odd gap. I think you end up, particularly when we talk about the percentage of our students who don't end on a college-bound pathway, they also will never be able to end on a college-bound pathway. Or I think, so I just think it's an odd gap that we put in. There's very little daylight between our graduation pathways in the state of Washington and what the state of Washington requires for college entry. Because it's not like individual schools, it's the same basic base set of requirements that across the schools. And so it feels like we leave that up to individual counseling when I don't know that that's necessary. Like, it's a fact that there's this gap. And so that's one that I would really like to see us look at a lot more closely and be more explicit about. Particularly if you have students that math is not their joy space, they are going to duck out of this additional senior math requirement because they can and graduate, but it leaves a gap. And so I just don't want us to base our thinking based on students who are going to finish all the math in the catalog, because we have those, or students that are going to, by happenstance, pick that up in another way, whether it's in taking physics their senior year and taking something else. But it's a real, for me, it's a strange gap we leave in the middle to not just be explicit about, hey, if you're on a college readiness pathway, there is something in between your graduation requirements and college acceptance in the state of Washington. And I'm obsessive compulsive, so I read all these things.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think,
get
like,
kids to school.
Is this something, and I don't, course catalogs for the class of 2028 are just about to be published. We're literally working on them now. And so I'm just wondering if this is something that I work with that team on, and Rich is in the room here, to more explicitly in the course catalog call out, these are your graduation requirements. These are university graduation requirements for students wanting
University entrance
university entry requirements in the state of Washington. And that is certainly something that we could add to the course catalogs.
I think that would be amazing.
And not just for Washington state-based schools. I mean, having a sophomore, the whole question is, do we really need a third year of the same foreign language or not? I feel I get a lot of conflicting information, and I would love for there to be a source of truth, which it should be the school district.
Yeah, and I don't know how we would do that for every single graduation or college entrance throughout the 50 states, but I think it's very close, right? I mean, I don't know. I haven't applied for college and my kid is going to college in the state of Washington, but we could certainly easily add the college entrance requirements for the state of Washington, and then, maybe an asterisk about.
In Washington, it is 2. I have it.
Yeah, I mean, put an asterisk for those of you interested in it. Please look at your state requirements in those states. I don't think that would be a hard thing for us. I know that's not part of what you're officially approving tonight, but I don't think that would be a hard piece of information for us to add to the high school course catalog, where it kind of spells out some of these things.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I was wondering, I had actually a lot of different things, but I'll just focus on what we're talking here. So I think for the college readiness, just even having a disclaimer that our graduate requirements aren't necessarily the same, and maybe a link to the HEC board, and to be able to say, this is what your wonderful school counselor, please set up an appointment and meet with.
Yeah.
Right? Utilize the staff members that are really trained in this. Around the performance-based, at some point I would be interested in seeing a dummy version of a Gibson-Eck diploma, because they are very different. And part of that performance-based is that they're documenting projects that they work on. How do you get, it looks completely different. It's a big circle of the competencies, and how have you done? How many of those competencies in those areas have you achieved? So I think it would be really interesting for the board to see, because I'm not even sure that the old board ever saw a version of it, let alone now we have new members on here, to see what that what that transcript looks like. Because we all are imagining the transcripts of the comprehensive high schools, and the Gibson-Eck one is extremely different.
I just want to be sure I have your question captured so I can, do you want to see an example of their report card or their transcript?
Their transcript.
Okay.
Because the mastery-based transcript looks very different and
Yes.
how
Very
that's,
different.
yes, yeah, so it's an artifact of example, yeah.
Yeah. And then I had just a couple of other questions around Gibson-Eck. So, the career, there's mentioned career crossing or career cruising instead of Zello. So are they not utilizing Zello in their high school and beyond plan? Or is that just it was the one that didn't get updated?
That's a great question. I'm looking at our Gibson.
Yeah, let's have our
Gibson
students answer that
Eck
question.
student. Are you using Zello?
They only used it last year. It was not super effective with our goals.
With your goals?
So we mostly do that work through our internship and LTI program. So, yeah, we don't use Zello. We used it last year, but I think we found it wasn't really effective.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's because the uniqueness of what's required of a Gibson-Eck student is very different from what is needed from a student in our comprehensive high schools. So I think Zello is probably built to better support our students in comprehensive high schools with the state graduation requirements. So schools like Gibson-Eck and other schools across the state that have waivers, it would make sense that it would be hard for Zello to support them as well.
Oh, and by the way, I did look it up. Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. I couldn't remember what the B stood for.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a very military word.
Okay. Any other questions on this before I go on to?
We do. We have
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, I just have one question. I just want to be really explicit so that I understand. You said 3 big changes from last year to this year.
In the report, yes.
Oh, in the report. Okay, so do I understand that the math requirements changed that in 27, 3 math classes between the grades 9 and 12? Now 3 math credits, one of which you can earn credit for potentially in middle school?
Oh, that's a great question. You're leading right into my next set of slides. But yes, that is exactly, and it's something that I'm proposing to you. The state hasn't done any changes. This is an internal decision that I'm proposing that we change. And I'll give you a preview. The reason I'm proposing we change it is I hear the board of directors. A theme I hear from you all is we want to give students more choices and open up some space and schedules. And so I'm going to make a proposal that we accept the middle school math courses, the high school courses that are taken and completed successfully by middle school students, that we allow those to count towards their math credits in high school. I can jump right to that bullet if we want to start there. It's the 3rd bullet up here.
Do you have a question before that? Because if it's about that topic, we're gonna go through the rest of these slides before we get to that topic. If it's
about the graduation pathways.
okay.
Okay.
Is this okay? So I'm wondering about like the student facing aspect of the graduation pathways. Is that only encountered by the student if they haven't taken or if they haven't taken or passed the state testing or any of the other options? Is that when they're given the option to fall into one of these categories? Is that chosen for them, or I haven't encountered this
The
before.
graduation pathways before? I'll be honest, that's a really great question. And I don't have the answer to it on how, do you want to answer the question?
So I think we want every student to be prepared to pursue and be ready for four-year college, to be ready for a career pathway, or to be ready to join the military successfully.
Yeah.
where the performance base is, it really belongs if you look at our board packet, page 2 of all of them lists the state quote pathways to graduation, with which I mentioned SAT, AP or IB passing grade, ASVAB, ELA math, SBA, and then now it will be this performance-based pathway option. And that is a requirement that the state has for graduation. That is sort of just the baseline things you must do, kind of like you must do for 24 credits, and you must do one of these things that demonstrates competency. The actual readiness part is more what we locally live and want and hope for each one of our students.
Okay, cool, gotcha.
Yeah, and if you're super curious about this, if you go onto the Washington State Board of Education, they have a nice diagram that's kind of a talking points for all of the things that Director Gallinger just listed, and we capture many of these in our college readiness one. So while there's only 4 bullets up there and there's 8 things on this piece of paper in front of me, many of them are captured under what we've defined as college readiness.
Okay.
For me, what my confusion is with this is not the actual requirements themselves and how they constitute readiness, but how and when our students are being told that these kind of things exist. I know for me, like this is the first time I'm hearing of any of these kind of graduation pathways things. And I'm assuming that's because the default is the kind of state testing that pretty much everyone in this school district goes through. But I do think it would be helpful and more transparent to our students to at least communicate these alternate pathways to them, maybe even when we're doing the course catalog for the incoming freshmen.
Yeah. So our, thank you for that. Our students who are currently in 8th grade are going to start those conversations at the end of February, where I don't know if you remember, the high school counselors come down to the middle school and have conversations. And then there's an evening event at the high school for parents and caretakers and students to go and ask questions. And that is exactly where these things will be discussed with the class of 2028. I can't speak to how it happened for you, but I do know that it is part of the conversations that the high schools will be having with the current 8th graders.
And to your point, it really is that the overwhelming number of our students just automatically check that box with their SBA testing. So it's really the counselors generally work with students who didn't check that box, or what is the pathway by which you're going to do that? Dr. Rhonda?
I also think the pathways are around classes, so I'm not going to take a world language because my plan is to go to DigiPen. They don't require it, and instead I want to take Comp Sci 1, Comp Sci 2. So that's also what those pathways might be inclined is around which courses, because our standard is probably pretty close to HEC board requirements. For the basic graduation requirements. And then all those places where it's asterisks and says about personalized pathways, that's what they mean by those personalized pathways.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a quick question, but so when I came to this district, I actually came in 8th grade. So I was forced to do WA state history over my 11th to 12th grade summer. I noticed that that's not on any of these grad requirements. So has it been removed or is it hidden under something?
It is hidden under something. It is still required.
In Issaquah, you take it in 7th grade. So that's why you missed it.
That's why you had to take it.
Yeah, that I got that.
And also on the documentation that we received and the link, if you look at each one, if you scroll all the way to the last page, there's the math and world social studies stuff that's kind of extra. And I'm sure you have lots to say about that now.
Yeah. So for students that move into the state, to go a little bit further with your, in 11th and 12th grade, that class can be waived, but for everybody else, that class has to be completed. And so, yes, you had to take it over the summer.
Okay. If we could get through the rest of this, that would be awesome.
Great. I could think of nothing more delightful. So I just want to talk a little bit, like I said, I hear you talking, I hear a theme that opening up space for students to have more choice in scheduling is important to you. It's important to us. And so there's a couple places where I want to call out that we have opened up space. And the first is that 7-period day for IHS and SHS. So that has created some space in kids' schedules for them to select more courses. Now, we did limit it for Liberty because we went from an 8-period day to a 7-period day. So there's a give and take there. The other thing where we have the internal district staff is limited is our world history. We ask that all of our current 9th graders in the Issaquah School District take a full year of world history, meaning World History 1 and then World History 2, and then we have the World History 3. The state actually only requires the content that is currently taught in World History 3 as we have it scoped and sequenced in the ISD. And so I don't recommend that we change that requirement because we are already starting to get ready to register kids for the following year. And that would pretty substantially change the system as it's currently set for students. I do think, however, that we should look at it for possibly the class of 2029 or even further. And I also want to say that I talked with principals and I talked with teachers about the possibility of changing this world history, and nobody is in support of it at this time. It will require some communications, some exploration. And while the state doesn't require the additional world history, they do recommend it. And the state is also strongly recommending an ethnic studies. And so we have some work to do in the social studies realm to really dig into possibly what it would require for us to offer an ethnic studies course, or what would it require us as a system if we were to ask students or not require students to take the full year of world history as 9th graders. So I'm not recommending changing that at this time. I just want to call it out and be transparent with you all. What I am asking you to consider changing is that previously our graduation requirements stated that math credits taken in the middle school were transcribed for students, but they only counted as an elective credit. They did not count towards their math graduation requirements. I would like to offer that we allow students to move those credits over in the math category towards graduation. We see data that supports this decision in that our students who took high school math in middle school are as successful, if not more successful, in the Algebra 2 classes as they enter into high school. We also see that students who complete 1 or 2 years of math in middle school, they go on to complete 4 more years of math typically. And so we're not going to suddenly not have a demand for higher level math courses. So that's a proposal that is in the documents for you to consider today. We also have some places where we limit student choice to be fiscally responsible. Our course offerings are driven by student requests, and then sometimes they're just driven by qualified staff. For example, at the middle level, I don't have a Spanish class at Maywood because we simply could not find a teacher to fill that spot. So there are limitations on our system that are sometimes outside of our control. There are some places where I've also heard you talk a lot about aligning across the system, some courses that should be aligned. That is also a place that could limit, but it could also expand. And so I just want us to be thoughtful because sometimes we do have unintended consequences. However, I also know there are places where we can align and should align. For example, AP Human Geography at one school can replace 9th grade, the 9th grade social studies requirement. At a different school, that class can only replace the 3rd year of world history. Makes no sense why one school could replace 2 different courses than at a different school. So there are places where the system needs to clean up, and we're doing that work along in our priority 2D strategy and our strategic plan. So with that, I'm happy to talk more or answer any questions that you have on this particular category.
I'm actually going to take public input at this time. Sure. So if there is public input in the room or on Zoom, we would love for you to come up to the dais, state your name and attendance area.
Hi, my name is Natalie Sheehan. I'm the Department Chair of Social Studies at Issaquah High School. And I'm here representing every member of the Issaquah Social Studies Department unanimously. We were very concerned to hear about the possibility of making World History 1 and 2 into an elective course. I know that's not being asked for next year, but the possibility even in the future is concerning to us. We did send an open letter penned by my colleague Derek Best to the superintendent, to Ms. Cox, as well as some other, I think Rich Mellish as well, expressing in depth our concerns, especially around equity, but I'll just paraphrase some of that for you. We believe that removing this credit requirement, even though it's not required by the state, would be a mistake. It would worsen educational outcomes for students and perhaps most critically decrease equity. One of our most important goals as a district right now is equity and the reduction of inequity amongst our students. And as you all know, this is articulated in executive limitation number 16. So one of the strategies we've all been talking about is increasing choice, but I want to emphasize that often choice is not equity, right? Ensuring one does not always ensure the other. In this particular instance, it is our professional opinion that allowing students to opt out of world history in favor of electives would not result in greater equity, but less equity. It will result in the de facto tracking of students and heighten the disproportionality between the highest and lowest achieving groups. I strongly recommend that you do not consider removing World History 1 and 2. We consider it a foundational course for the rest of our social studies years. Is a class where students learn how to take notes, where they learn how to write essays, where they learn how to take tests, how to study, to examine bias, to think critically, which is so critically important in our social media age. We are all very concerned. I know that Skyline has also expressed their concern. I haven't heard from Liberty, but this is something that would be an extremely large and negative change, we believe, for all three comprehensive high schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any more public input in the room? I think there's public input on Zoom.
Yes.
Okay. Alrighty, Gwen Lloyd. Do you want to turn on your camera and unmute and introduce yourself in your attendance area?
Oh, I don't know if this is working well. There we go. Yes. Good evening, and thank you for taking comment on this important subject. My name is Gwen Lloyd. I'm a humanities teacher at
We
Skyline.
don't hear any volume.
Oh, am I muted? Let's see.
There's no indicator.
There's no indicator. Okay, so
You're not muted.
can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
She might need to make sure that Zoom under the microphone.
Yeah. Oh, how about now?
That it's actually looking at her microphone. Not something else on her computer.
Did that.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Good evening. Thank you for taking public comment on this important subject. My name is Gwen Lloyd. I'm a humanities teacher at Skyline High School, and I'm a parent of a Skyline graduate. There's a few points I want to make. I'll try to keep my comments as short as possible. But while the suggestion for world history that the district is proposing does meet the requirements of OSPI, it does not meet the recommended setup for those credits in social studies by OSPI. And to echo what the previous speaker said, the district puts a lot of energy into claiming to embrace, and not claiming, I don't want to say claiming, into embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion. But when you really think about that, where is that reflected in our curriculum? And the humanities is an area where it is very specifically echoed in our curriculum. In world history, where teachers are able to teach students about the diversity of cultures in this world that we live in. Cutting world history 1 and 2 belies that commitment. While it's true that we could offer some great electives, the reality is the students who most need to take classes like cultural studies of other areas are not the students who will enroll in those electives. The place that they get that is in our World History 1 and 2 classes. Starting all students at World History 3 means that our World History curriculum is destined to be primarily Euro-focused. And making this change would put our students at a disadvantage as compared to nearby districts. Bellevue requires 3.5 credits for social studies to graduate, half a credit more than we do, including 3 semesters of world history, 2 in American history, 1 in semesters, 3 semesters of world history, 2 of US history, 1 of American government, and 1 in current world issues. Seattle School District allows for more student choice by having all students take World History 1, and then students can choose, if choice is what you're going for, between World History 2, Ethnic Studies World History 2, AP World History 1, or AP Human Geography. And the choices are similar for World History 3, but students are still getting the content from that time period. Student choice is important, and it's true that education is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Moving to a 7-period day did much to give students choice in their studies. That said, history doesn't happen in a vacuum, and students need the foundations of the past to learn about the present and the future they're going to live in. We can't possibly teach about the rise of dictators if we don't explain the conditions of the world at the time, beginning before World War II. And how are they going to understand those conditions if they don't understand what the world looked like coming out of World War I? History isn't a place for student choice. Students only take courses they're comfortable with. And frankly, if you're comfortable learning about history, you may not really be learning history. We don't give students choice in early math courses. They have to take Algebra 1 before moving to Algebra 2. And this is
You
no
need to
different.
wrap up.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that you're putting this off until next year and not making this a requirement for the next year's graduates. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's the next speaker? Okay, Deborah Walters, if you want to turn on your video and unmute.
I do. Hang on one second. I'm like, I was like so intuitive with Gwen's thing. So give me 1 second. Sorry. I just want to talk about the social studies requirement. So we have a concern at Skyline that our kids are required to take World History 1, 2, and 3, which, the state says we don't need to do. And we have block scheduling and integrated learning. And I just want to talk about how we can maybe reschedule that, because our students don't need to do that. And so I'm hoping that we can have a conversation about, how that impacts our students moving forward. So any thoughts on that? We have submitted data showing that the integrated block schedule impacts our students, and we're hoping, especially our students with IEPs. And so we're hoping that we can get something on the table to have a conversation. What do you think?
Thank you for your feedback. Any others in the room or on Zoom? Okay, thank you. Now I wanted to open up to board questions and discussion. I think it would be easiest if we focus on just one piece at a time. I think the math part would be first. And again, this is just administration proposal. What the board precedent has been over at least the time I've been here has been 3 years of math in high school.
Maybe I'll start with a question and then go to a comment. So of other courses taken in middle school, high school courses taken in middle school, is math currently an outlier in
Yes.
being used for And so what are the other areas that you can take in?
Your Spanish class often is taken in that is transcribed over as a world language credit.
Is that the only other?
Science, biology.
Science, biology.
And biology
and-
goes, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, if I go back to my earlier concern about the gap between the math requirements and college, I feel like I get further apart with that change. I understand. I actually, as I asked that question, I was like, well, I guess I don't understand why there's a difference in their treatment between classes that are high school classes taken in middle school. But that's, I guess, my concern is just, does that gap that I'm already concerned about, which is getting to the algebra-based course in senior year, does that widen because I only have to do my freshman and sophomore year? So that would be my concern.
For some students, just freshman year, which
Correct.
would be highly problematic if they want to go to a school like the University of Washington, which requires that you do high-level math or science course in your senior year. And they explicitly spell that out. So we would be potentially doing students a disservice who haven't navigated our system before. I see I want to hold off on that, make sure I hear me, because it looked like Director Taylor was going to say something based on his.
Again, very obvious question. Same curriculum? I mean, is it
Yeah,
essentially
same curriculum. Mhm. And the data shows that the middle school kids go on to do very well in the next series of courses at high school.
Which I would say that if we have a student that's doing algebra or algebra and geometry in middle school, odds are they're pursuing multiple years of math. They're doing that so they can pursue multiple years of math in high school. So I'm not sure the change would be meaningful for them, number one, and two, then I worry about the equity appearance for, oh, why do some students not have to take 3 years of math in high school and others do? And I want all of our students to feel like they're not at a disadvantage or have a different requirements for graduation if they didn't take X math in middle school. And I think that impact is more concerning to me, especially when aligned with, I'm not a senior parent, but that whole concept of there's college readiness and then there's college readiness. So sorry, Director Coyne.
Yep. Oh, thank you. Just a point of clarification, because I guess I was getting this confused. I was thinking it would only be the 8th grade year, but to me, it sounded like it could be your 7th, 8th grade, and then freshman. That would potentially be the only time you'd have to take math in high school. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay.
Although the data does not show that plays out, the likelihood that the kids who are very successful in high school courses in middle school math go on to pursue math throughout college. But
No,
yes,
our
but
students are pretty smart. Like this class, students have learned which state tests they don't need to take, and therefore we see
Yeah.
widely variance.
and I just want to be clear, like I personally don't have very strong feelings either way on this. It's just an opportunity that would allow students some flexibility in their courses. It would allow them to perhaps pursue math, higher level math. We've got some, it would just open up opportunities for students.
So another point of clarification, because I have an elementary school student, so this is all new to me. So you could get potentially a middle school kid could get 2 years credit of math.
Correct.
Well, could we just say 1? I mean, is that a possibility? Saying that you can get 1 year of max, and that would then require 2 years of high school?
I mean, we can say whatever we want,
Right.
as is the answer to that. I think it doesn't address the concerns that I think that Director Mullins has brought up about what message is that sending directly or indirectly, especially to your point of a rising middle school parent who, for me now, being a sophomore parent and still feeling completely clueless of this whole concept of what's next. And February is terrifying to me that I have to do registration again for the junior year. And that message might send the wrong message. Director Coyne, looks like you're ready to.
Yeah, I did have another one. I guess hypothetically speaking, though, if we look at the different pathways and we're looking at the career pathway, if a student is looking at that career pathway, it seems to me it might make sense for them to be freed up to take more courses. So maybe this math option would make sense. I guess I see a plus with that, but then I also see, well, what in middle school or early high school to make that decision might be too soon. And then if they suddenly decide into sophomore year, junior year, oh, I think I do want to go to college, that could be a bit of a challenge because they've kind of pigeonholed themselves into a certain track. So just a thought. I'm thinking out I'm kind of contradicting myself, but kind of broader concerns I'm saying.
Thank you. Want to open up to Mia?
I think that a lot of what we should also be looking at is that those, while we get, the Spanish and the biology credits that you can take in 8th grade, go into your transcript as Spanish and science credits, you just get elective credits with math. And at that point, it almost, not discredits, because you should be taking the class for learning for the sake of learning, but it almost discredits the work students are putting into those math classes only to get elective credits out of them. And I understand the worry with that gap between high school and college if students, only take math for those 3 years and then don't take it for the other 3 years of high school. But I also don't see any student who chooses to take high school level math in 7th grade not continuing math in their high school career. If that makes sense.
Completely makes sense, which was my point of, if we make the change, what benefit would that be? Versus then we would have to look and see then what would be the risk. So if it doesn't provide any benefit, but it does provide potential risk, that's the policy part that we live in. And that's the tension that the space that we're at right now. So you bring that up. Can I go to students before? Absolutely.
I think it seems that the issue is with the high school, what's required to graduate high school versus what's required to go to college. And I think in general, I think whatever we need to go to graduate to college, at least in Washington, at least in Washington State, that should be, I think, posted very clearly on our website or of some sort, like very close by to the high school grad requirements, so that people who do want to go to college will know exactly what they have to do. And I mean, I don't think colleges would accept taking only 1 year of math in high school. I think they still have the 3 years of math in high school requirements. So maybe that should be made pretty clear. And I mean, hopefully that would minimize the risk of kids not going to college because of their math credits.
Yeah, I think that highlights what Dr. Mullins was mentioning. Dr. Taylor.
Trying to remember my question now. Is there any evidence in the reverse or a concern that if you didn't give the credit, you'd have a chilling effect in middle school, meaning kids, why am I going to take advanced math when I'm just going to have to go to, no, that's not a concern.
It wasn't, at least I can speak as a middle school parent and who took 2 years of, student took 2 years of math, like algebra and geometry in middle school.
And then 3 more.
4 more, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for my kiddo that went to Liberty, it was, algebra and geometry, because it was really, that was the advanced track, right? So that was back when every student was pushed towards algebra in 8th grade. And then we went away with that with Common Core. Now we're sitting back there. So I think we are going to have a lot more kids that are going to fall into that, taking algebra in 7th grade, geometry in 8th grade, because we really do have so many students that are capable of that. And I don't know anyone that comes out and go, yeah, but I'm really good at math, but I'm going to become a lawyer or an English teacher. So I'm not really going to pursue those higher maths. So I think that's why we continue to see it. To me, where this would be effective, if we started talking about opportunities for project-based learning in high school, in which I want my algebra class or my geometry class to count because I want to take an elective that's going to be a project in which I'm going to use, I'm going to study the thickness of the Arctic over time and be able to do all of these high-level calculations, like we did have a student do several years back, and had this whole, used Excel to be able to watch over time the melting of the ice sheets. It was fantastic and really high-level math. So if we were looking at that as the option, so I think to me, what's more important is what would we be replacing it with? And I think even with the next conversation around social studies, it's not so much about what we want to do with what we have, but what goes in that place. So I think it would depend on what the thoughts are around what are the options for something that might be a high level math that's just different from Calc AB or Calc BC.
And what you're describing though, isn't that what we already have with students that can go into CTE, into computer science and advanced computer science? So I think, I guess I'm putting myself squarely in the, I don't like the change, because I think the whole point of accelerating in middle school is to open up the options at high school. And those may include, yes, I did 3 years, but some of those years are computer science, or some of those years are another discipline that would take me further down a different exploratory path. The kids who can handle algebra and geometry in middle school can handle algebra and geometry in middle school. We're not adjusting that, but it does, by doing that, it should open them up to additional choices to use those 3 credits for. And so I guess I've walked myself to, I don't like, I'm not in favor of the change, because I don't want to lose the potential of that acceleration to get them either to Calc, goodness, that terrifies me as a words person, but to Calc BC or to advanced computer sci in high school, or to my dream of them actually being able to get certified to work in computer science before they're done, or to work in something else. So I guess for me, I don't love it.
See, whereas I almost hear that and see the opposite. Like if they could say my algebra and geometry are already done, that leaves me 2 holes of electives where I can say, and I'm going to fill those electives with comp sci and then comp sci project.
We don't take away that they're done.
Right, and they still can do the comp sci, and that still counts as a high level math.
That's
So
their high level math.
That's a
Okay.
current pathway that exists today.
What I don't want to do is take away the incentive to stretch at the top end of it, because they're already going to be done. And so, yeah.
Yeah. I tend to agree.
So I do want to keep this separate discussions before we actually talk about social studies, because I think this is what's before us. So I would love to get to conclusion. And if we don't think we're going to get to conclusion tonight and don't want to take a vote on this, that's also okay. But any more thoughts on the math discussion?
So I don't think we're gonna get there tonight. I'm there. I don't think we're gonna get there, but you could be different. And I think maybe there is an additional piece of like actually seeing the data on choice for students, like where are they actually laying out of making choice across the potential acceleration in middle school and then the 4 years of high school. Like I think that would be maybe an additional enhancement for others, although I'm there.
Oh, I think there might be more people there than you think.
Oh,
So, yeah. Other thoughts or, okay. Then I think I'm ready to entertain a motion, and then we can open more discussion. Or I guess we're going to have to modify our motion is what we have to do, because it's
You can do an amendment to your motion.
to. Actually, I want to ask Marnie. So would this be cleaner to reject what we motioned and then start with a clean motion?
I think if we are only changing the grad requirements around math, we can be specific that we want. And to be clear, is the amendment that we want to amend it so that it is 3 years required in the high school.
Yes.
Okay. So I move we amend the graduation requirements for Echo Glen, Liberty, Skyline, and Issaquah High School to include 3 years of mathematics in the high school.
I think last time it was listed as grades 9 through 12, but.
Grades 9 through 12.
Second.
Okay. And before I open it for discussion, just to be clear to our students and community, this is actually a vote to not change how it currently has been for perpetuity for all intents and purposes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Board discussion on this amendment.
So I must have missed, do we know what year did we say that it wasn't, the 3rd year wasn't required to be Algebra 3 or Algebra 2? I'm sorry. Has that been a while? Did I just miss that over time? Because that one's, I'm like, oh, it's not algebra 2. Okay.
I
The third
do
year.
not know the
That
answer.
was a state board change.
Yeah.
Okay.
When that came.
Because that's where state board dictates what we must
Yeah.
complete.
No, I'm doing a happy dance about that.
Any other board discussion on the amendment? Okay. Yes.
Was just wondering what would be the general student opinion on this? Like, would they be supportive of it? And like, how would that compare to, for example, math teachers, and how would they be supportive? Like, do we have that data by any chance? Just curious.
We have 6 students here, so
Well, I was talking about the student population as a whole. So like, yeah, more like a greater number of responses probably than 6.
yeah, we're as Ms. Cox said, this is for current 8th graders. So I'm not sure that would be the right audience that we would want to ask the question of, to have that, I think, understanding that they would need to have about what Director Moline said is, as now you're applying to college, and what is that gap between those two. So I appreciate your sentiment. I'm not sure that that would be something that would change our opinion. I would suspect that the math teachers
I actually talked to them, and they are supportive of either changing or not changing. It doesn't have an impact on them.
right, because I think that they would believe, like we do, that the students who take early higher level math in middle school will keep on taking it, so they don't worry that they're going to not be filling those courses. We worry about, again, if it's not a benefit, what are the potential risks, of which I think have been highlighted by Director Points. Other board discussion? Alrighty, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Now we're moving to vote on the amended motion for adopting the graduation requirements for the class of 2028. Rebecca, Glen, Gibson Neck, Issaquah, Liberty, and Skyline High Schools. Any discussion further? Oh,
I think the only question I had jotted down for myself was around PE waivers. What do we allow versus what the state allows? Because there was a whole thing somewhere, and I'm trying to remember where I read it, saying that except for athletics, if they're involved in athletics, or there was like a list of things where you could waive the PE requirement. And I'm not sure, are we doing that? Is that something new? Which it wouldn't, apparently it isn't, because it's not on your new list.
We follow the state guidelines for the waiving of PE.
PE,
Yep.
okay. That was my question. Now I'm done.
other questions or board discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the amended motion ahead of us, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. There are your graduation requirements for 2028. Before we move off from this topic, though, I do want to move back to the social studies part, because I don't know what interest or desire, and this is where I would really do want to hear the student voice, since you guys at this level have already experienced the social studies curriculum, and you've heard from teachers already as well. So it really would be your perspective on if freeing up another semester of elective would be valuable to you. That's really the question in front of us. I think we can always customize and scope and sequence specific learning targets we want our social studies curriculum to embody. And we wouldn't want to miss the things that have been highlighted by our teachers and counselors who've spoke. But the question is now that you've experienced what you've experienced in our system, what was the value versus having another semester of flexibility?
And just to clarify, and it would be flexibility as to a social studies credit, not just a random credit.
I personally didn't take the world history 1 and 2 because I did ninth grade, I did AP Human Geography, and then I went into AP World History. So I can't speak for the benefit of those classes, but I think it depends on the range of social studies classes offered. You know, if are there really that many more social studies electives that students would really want to take over World History 1 and 2? I don't think that they're bad classes to take. I think they're great classes to take. So
I think Siddharth and I did have a thought. We both took world history 1 and 2. Something that we discussed and noted was that a lot of what we learned and a lot of what we retained from those classes was a lot of European history. We didn't learn a ton about the cultures of other countries around the world and other nations around the world, specifically the Middle East and Asia. So hearing something about ethnic studies, that sounds like something I would be interested in. I do think that some of our teachers in the public comments, they brought up good things about having world histories 1 and 2. They do teach basic foundations about learning about bias and about imperialism, and it's just about like dictatorships and how like basically how great civilizations came to be. I think those are great foundational skills for observing history in the coming years, and those classes in the coming years, just building skills like writing essays, stuff like that. But I do think that having more diversity in our history curriculum could be very beneficial, especially like in recent events. We don't in schools we don't hear a lot about the cultures and histories of other countries besides those in Europe and the US.
Yeah, I would agree with what Naomi said about world history, especially World History 2, as I remember, was mostly basically the same thing as you'll learn in the first semester of AP Euro, but with less detail. So it's very, very European focused. I think though, yeah, I do agree also with the sentiment of the social studies teachers that World History 1 and 2, they teach you essential skills. And I mean, I also think it's good to know about the ancient world, which I think is World History 1, and then I think World History 2 focuses more on the Renaissance period onwards. But yeah, I think it's good to know about those periods and especially how they shape, because what happened in those periods directly shapes the next period, and then each of those periods would then shape what's happening right now. So I think it would be very useful to keep that.
Yeah, sorry.
The Gibson-Eck model is very different, and we achieve our social studies requirements through projects and stuff. But I think it would be really important to open a space for current world event discussions. And I don't know exactly what is talked about in social studies, like in world history, like 1 and 2 versus in 3. But I think it's really, and I mean, public comment and just events around us, and what I've been talked to like by other students in my schools, and also at Liberty, I've been talked to by some friends who have talked about how like it would be really important to be able to also like learning to disagree and stuff like that. I don't know. I think it'd be important to open a space for that. So I don't know if it would be within world history or an elective or something like that. Yeah.
Since Leilani mentioned current events, I actually would like to add this, but I remember that in Issaquah High that we do have, or at least when I was in junior year, we did have a current events class, but that was an elective. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, you had.
I guess I think the main thing that we're saying overall is that making world history 1 and 2 optional is kind of only a viable option if the electives offered are also valuable for like the cultures and current events offered, and teach those foundational skills that are really essential to learn in world history 1 and 2.
Any board thoughts, especially if we have a lot of current high school parents here?
Is someone talking about making world history 1 and 2 optional? Because that seems to be the basic gist of this whole discussion we're having. And I don't-
In the future, because it is not, it's optional in the state requirements have changed, actually changed several years ago, but we didn't. So that it's optional to have some type of social study requirement. And we have continued to say, yes, your social studies requirement is a World 1, World 2 class and not something else that follows the standards, but might be different.
But we're not currently talking about changing it.
I think what we're looking is there head nods to have further discussion on this, or is there not? That's, I think, really what I would love to walk away from this as someone who has to do agenda planning with our superintendent.
I think, well, I have the luxury of, I had a discussion with Executive Director Mellish last week, and I do think that it's something to consider. And part of that is because I'm very much of the, just because we've always done it doesn't mean we need to continue to do it. I would like to hear, what would that look like? Not that I devalue what World History 1 and 2 are, but I'm like, is there a way to frame things differently so that when your choices might be about governmental structures over time, right? It might be a world history that really talks about migration of peoples over time, right? So how can you look at world history in different ways, teaching to the standards, but in something that might be completely different than the way we've done it before, but really capture so many of those topics?
I think too, just as a point of clarification too, I think with our world history curriculum, I'm envisioning it and basically, from public comment too, I think it will evolve over time too, to cover some of the ethnic studies we've talked about. I think, some of the other broader topics as well. I guess I have concerns with the idea of not making it a requirement. I'm pretty staunch in my belief that it absolutely needs to be a requirement, 1 and 2. I mean, I'd be open to hearing more broad conversation, but I'm pretty set in my belief on that. So
I will say from the macro level, I think this type of learning is very important for some of the public comment that was brought up about equity and cultural awareness and things of that nature. I'm open to a discussion as to, are there other ways to get to those learnings? I mean, I can see that there could be other course offerings perhaps. But as of right now, I'm probably with Director Coyne in that I would not support a change right now without at least a lot more information along those lines, what that would look like. But I'm talking to a history major here, so I just really believe that it's very, very valuable.
Right. I mean, you move into words, it's my lane. The math pathway, my goodness, I could barely survive geometry. I guess we have these unusual conversations where they kind of come in backwards for me. So I guess maybe if I can try to make sure I understand what the forwards conversation is. So the state has changed the requirement set. We have not yet changed our requirement set. There is, as with any other curriculum, some ongoing discussion about where we should be or where we should not be from a requirement perspective. It seems that, which makes sense to me, how many credits is an interesting conversation. But then there seems to be a discussion about what are the right things to fulfill those requirements and how committed are we to those individually. I think what our students are saying, and certainly in my experience, we have classes called world history that tend to be more Eurocentric. So my hope would be if we are going to uncork what's happening in that curriculum, yes, we should uncork what do they cover, what's the ground they cover, and to what end, whether that's in the core world history 1 and 2, and I'm sure the professionals will look at that, versus what are the additional add-on electives. I'm happy to have that as a future conversation. It seems like we kind of, for me, like we got there through some weird innuendo about potentially something happening. So if that's the discussion, I'm all in.
I think for me, I don't really have a strong opinion either way. I think when you look at slide 4 of what was presented, when it's listed as 1.0 credits of social studies elective, when in reality at all of our comprehensive high schools, it's not an elective. We probably need to just call this out as saying 1.0 credit world history freshman year. And I think that's the rub for me. What we present needs to match with what our students actually experience.
Yeah.
Because to say there's choice when there's not really choice, if that's what we believe that our community, which we're here to represent, wants and is best for our student body, then I'm fine for us to plant that flag in the ground and say, this is a graduation requirement. But I think what's misleading is when it's led with on our presentation tonight as 1.0 elective. Does that make sense? And I think that's
Totally agree.
that's
Totally agree.
why for me, I don't know where that comes from or what the intention is of that, but it sends a message of, I think that brings us to why we're here talking about it.
Yeah.
So
I will say that in the last page where it talks about the math and the world history, it still says that world history 1 and 2 are required. So I agree. So it doesn't match what's up, what's up above.
yes, when you look at that individual schools one that you open up, they all says, it gives a blurb saying this is a requirement at which insert whatever name of school. So I think that having that be required is good. I don't think that I'm hearing an appetite for us to be moving in a direction, except I think the question that's been before us through all the public input we've heard over the past month, as well as what students have elevated, is how do we do it? Yes, and how do we also ensure that our students are getting a comprehensive view of current events and being able to apply all of those things that address bias and how to accurately look at information and then use those lenses to look at today. And I think we're hearing a how do we go forward in that, and that's where you get to do your good work.
Yeah, I mean, the yes, and the question has come before us of what are we requiring above and beyond the state requirements? And this was the right opportunity to have that conversation as we considered that and discuss that in the context of today, as well as the future of potentially where we need to go to prepare students and support students in their voice and choice as well. So it is going to always be a tension of choices as we continue forward, but we wanted to lay the foundation for that conversation and tease that out together.
Director Moraldo.
If we do have a conversation about this, which I would appreciate, I would like to understand why the State Board of Education changed that. Because if they're offering flexibility and we want rigidity, I need to understand why they wanted that flexibility and what we're saying when we don't offer it.
Yes, I don't want us to leave the topic, but it helps us know that how Dr. Williams correctly said is like, it seems like we're entering this backwards, which makes sense. Is what is it that we want to have the discussion? What are the boundaries of it? And what do we want the outcomes to be? And it sounds like the appetite is not to change what we have necessarily, but to further explore why do we have flexibility? Right. What is it that we keep and how do we do it guessing?
I can't, I of course can't find it now, but on this topic, in one of these documents, I think it says that IHS is the outlier. IHS had a slightly different requirement in one of these. So on social studies, there was one, it's IHS because that's why it piqued my interest, but one of them had a slightly different social studies requirement, and now I can't find it.
Do we have an answer?
They don't think
I
maybe
think.
I'll find it, but in
Are you-
maybe it's one of the
Are you
mismatches in the documents.
Are you referring to the third page of the grad requirements documents where it says Issaquah requires an additional 0.5 credit of world history?
Yes.
That is actually stated in all of them.
Oh, so that's not Issaquah High School.
Yeah,
That is the Issaquah.
Yeah, it's not calling
School
it as an outlier compared to their schools. It's calling it out because it's the target audience is that high school, because it's saying that we're also requiring that above and beyond. So
Yes. So it says Skylines is different.
yeah, so it'll say the same thing with a different.
That's so
because
weird.
Well,
That's just weird language. Sorry.
well, I agree.
Especially since it's
but this
World
is-
History 3.
So this is bringing us back to where actually one of the queries has been, which is what are we requiring above and beyond? And this is trying to make that clear, but I hear your point on the language and it's repeated through each course each.
As if it's special.
It's yeah, but I understand the interpretation of how that could be.
And
Yeah.
I think it goes back to Director Gallinger's point too, around making sure we have that consistency, because it is something. If you read it out of context, it appears that Issaquah High has something different. So yeah, that just proves that point. Yeah.
We would just replace that with the Issaquah School District requires
Yes.
at
Yeah.
each of the high schools, including, or something like that to make that clear.
Yes, that might help. Okay.
Okay, so I've captured, so state flexibility versus local rigidity. I think so we can certainly have a really nice work study about that. And I'll try and reach out and find a state board or OSPI person to come in and talk about, to be able to bounce questions off of, as well as, you know, we obviously want to have our district leadership and staff and teachers and students there. Okay. Any other comments on this topic before we move on to the next? The only one I had is Zello. I don't really still know what it is. As a parent of a sophomore, I'm not convinced my sophomore has ever actually opened Zello. And I've seen head shakes from
I can
seniors.
confirm that there is a lot of Zello entry happening as we speak.
For a senior.
Because I
For-
think it's
because it's
required.
So your senior's doing it for,
Yes, and
For
all of her friends.
yeah.
They're
So
all entering
if
Zello.
it's something that is important, it would be great. Can this live with our campus homepage where parents can also visualize it? Like we can visualize things that we see in other courses?
Good
Is
question.
that technology
Well,
exists? So
we will,
that's
we will,
a
we will
question
find
to-
out more. Yeah. I mean, Lisa Neighbors is a expert on it, so we can
It
follow
needs one
and
of
find
those
out more.
United Way, like thermostat things. So, you know, like the first year got
Yeah.
done, the second year got done, the third year got done. The fourth year
Yes,
got
a
done.
progress monitoring visual.
Yes.
That's, yeah, by 25, 50,
Yes.
75, and 100. Okay. This is why one of our strategies is to make sure that we are leveraging all of the tools available for high school beyond planning to ensure that we are, and so this speaks to informing that. Thank you.
Okay. The next item is legislative matters.
Does AJ?
I'm going to say that AJ and I had a meeting, was it yesterday?
It was yesterday, yes.
So, and his question was, so what's my job as legislative advocacy?
And then number one on my list is connect with Harlan. So
Perfect. We will definitely need to do some very aggressive planning for legislative conference in 3 weeks' time.
As
Yeah.
a reminder, that's a day on the Hill. Do you want to share what that is, just so for those who are listening?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So end of this month, we will be down in Olympia, and it's a 2-day conference. One day is we're all together. There's some sessions where you get to hear from speakers in order to prepare for the day. The second day is where we go and do local or visits with our local legislators, particularly in the 5th and 41st legislative districts. In the past, we've also tried to have governor meet and greets, and we've met with other executives in Olympia. So that is that. And I think you have students that are identified.
Yes, we do.
Perfect. And is there any other federal updates as far as you want to just map out what's coming up?
So also coming up at the end of the month, same time frame, is Advocacy Institute. So I will be at that, and the Beliefs and Resolution Committee, which I happen to chair, has come up with a priority list. So rather than basically looking at what Congress is doing and trying to put our messaging around that, in August at Summer Leadership, we did a whole prioritization, like what are issues that are important to school board members that are federally related. And so we've built backwards, and which is really the way we should have. We should be going to them to talk about here's what our insights are. So we have meetings that we'll be attending with Representative Schreier and Representative Smith, as well as Senators Murray and Cantwell. So that will all happen. But I think it's really going through this process with the Beliefs and Resolutions Committee. I feel like we're at a point to really talk to our membership about what to advocate for and how to do that. And so we've been doing a lot of prep work. So I think that's the big thing I'm excited about. I get to go on Day on the Hill 2 days in a row. So I'm with another organization. So I'm really excited about that.
Thank you for that update. Next item is announcements and correspondence. we've generally sent everything to Bethany. Is there anything else that isn't that you need to send? Not seeing anything. Last item is calendar and future agenda topics. Thank you, Bethany, for adding these. Can you clarify what the first one is? Is that just with Sydney and I?
That is not a formal linkage meeting between two public entities, but it is a linkage meeting between a portion of the board with the council.
So board leadership and council leadership. Okay,
Yes.
have we reached out about a linkage potential yet? Okay, so we definitely need to prioritize that. The next one is the 2024 PTSA general, and it's not general, it's PTSA council meetings in our building. Yes, okay. So those are ones that historically were attended by Director Weaver. I think it would be great to open them up. So the council leadership, so it's the PTSA presidents from all of our buildings, have a chance to get to meet us. And so my preference would be for each of us to take one of those dates. And then the same thing with the 2024 PTSA general or leadership meetings, and that's with the council president and the superintendent and a school board member, which again was classically Director Weaver. My preference would be that we also divvy up those dates. The times and location are already identified there. So if you would mind taking a look at that. We already calendared the executive sessions for superintendent evaluation. Does that mean we have to take action on those? Is that why they're here? Did we not take action? I thought we took action. Okay. Okay, so those are done. And then now you've listed SIP plans. And my question for you is, you listed just one elementary school. Do you plan on having all 16 of our elementary schools?
Yes, and then secondary is combined because they're collaborating together. So that's why there's two instead of three. Because in the past, when we did it by level, it was elementary, middle, and then high.
We did four there because it was like two. We split up. That's why I was asking.
Yes, so fair. We were wanting to do it all together. Yes.
Okay, no. Totally
Thank you.
So we asked for our administration to give us dates far in advance for those. Jumping out of those two, I guess we need to make sure WASDA isn't on because it often starts early when we're in Spokane. So maybe you can look at that November 20th, see where, if you look at WASDA right now.
Would it be possible to separate those out? I'm just thinking work-wise with WASDA, with all of that concentrated right around that time of November would be hard. I don't know if there's a way to move one of the SIP meetings into October or.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why we're doing it far enough in advance that these are proposed dates.
Sure. Oh yeah, yeah.
We want to get
definitely.
that feedback here.
Definitely.
So it's really looking at those two dates, and I think I would
Yeah.
say that second one is going to be. I bet that's going to conflict with.
We'll have to come back to the proposal. October is such the beginning of the school year still that it's and we'd want to do them earlier, so it's more about being able to look forward into the school year and take into feedback. So November was kind of the sweet spot, but we can come back to you with some other options on that second date on November 20th.
And the conference is the 21st through the 23rd.
Right, but that means there'll be a WASDA board meeting the night before, right? And there's two of us.
Yes.
That's why.
Just looking at the numbers, so I don't confuse. Okay, yeah.
So it means we'll be flying out like the morning of the. Right. Okay, does anyone have any of these dates? If not, we can always do this offline. But if someone wants to claim any of the PTSA general membership meeting or council meeting dates or the leadership with council president meeting dates, this is the moment to do that.
For the PTSA general membership meeting, I'll take the March 21st meeting.
I can do the February 15th as well.
Okay, and you're capturing all this. Okay. And
am I wrong, or is for the leadership meeting dates, PTSA leadership meetings, isn't March 3rd a Sunday? Or is that a meeting on a Sunday?
I haven't looked that far ahead.
March 3rd is a Sunday.
Are you working every day?
It's meant to say March 7th for the PTSA leadership meeting.
Yep, no worries. Okay. So it's March 7th.
I can do that.
March 7th?
Yeah.
Okay, so Director Taylor's claiming March 7th. I'm gonna look at January 18th right now, and then we will end this meeting. So I think I can do January 18th. And then lastly, would you, for the next time, send our foundation date meetings so that way we can make sure that those are all covered? Because there may be dates that I can't. As soon as I see them, I'll let you know. Okay, if there's anything else for calendar or future agenda topics?
I'll take the May 2nd PTSA leadership meeting. I'll do that one. Did anybody claim that one already? Okay, I'll take that. Easier to start planning ahead now.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking as much calendaring ahead of time as
Yes.
possible. That'll be easier for all of us. Okay, perfect. Well, if there's nothing else,